The Philadelphia Eagles are an absolute mess right now. I feel like we've been saying that for months, but this team just seems to, even in the offseason, continue to make this fan base question how much faith we should have in them. There's the whole A.J. Brown situation, which we're going to continue to discuss. We got into it at length yesterday, and it was more of a conversation about media interaction and whether or not the comments from his Twitter account were fair, in that the media is sometimes overstepping in this city, or is it that the players need to have thicker skin knowing they're playing in a city like Philadelphia? But on top of that, this is the more important thing, right? Because ultimately, when A.J. Brown is on the field, he has undeniable talent. He's productive. He had a string of 6 straight games with 125-plus yards, an NFL record. Like, the guy is an unbelievable talent at wide receiver. So that's a conversation we'll get into about whether or not that outweighs all of the drama surrounding this team right now. But my question today starts with the head coach. It starts with Nick Sirianni, because ultimately he is the head of the snake. He is the one that has to orchestrate all of this. Even if he's not calling the offense, even if he's not calling the defense, he is still, at least in title, the head coach of this football team. And the more I think about the way this past season ended, yes, the coordinators were not up to the standard that they had to be to put this team in a place where they could compete at the playoff level. That is my number one reason why the team collapsed. But Nick Sirianni was responsible for at least part of the offense and potentially some of the play calls. We don't know the exact split, but we know that he was very involved with the offense. And if you believe what he's told us and what Howie Roseman has told us, Nick Sirianni was also the decision maker in removing Sean Desai from defensive coordinator duties and giving those responsibilities to Matt Patricia. That was an awful move. The defense, which already had their issues, went completely off a cliff after that move. That is partially on Matt Patricia, but it's also partially on the man who made the decision. And everyone has told us, whether you believe it or not, we have to go by what the organization is saying, and we've been told that was Nick Sirianni's decision. So he is at least partially responsible for the offensive issues. He is at least partially responsible for the defensive issues, and he is certainly going to catch flack for the reports coming out of the locker room, both during the season and after the season. The finger pointing, the comments coming out, the inability of this team to stay together when they hit adversity. It's on more people than just Nick Sirianni, but we look at players as leaders. Ultimately, their job is to play good football. There have been great football players before that were not great leaders. Those things are not required of each other. But as the head coach of a team, you have to be a great leader. I'm not saying Nick Sirianni is not. I think there are some things about him that have the characteristics of great leadership. And there are clearly players in the locker room who still feel he is capable of being that guy for this team. We've heard some of them speak out. Jason Kelce has said as much. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith have said as much. I mean, Britton Covey, for what his word is worth, all due respect to Britton Covey, has said as much. Like, there have been guys that have come out and defended Nick Sirianni. But ultimately, the more I hear about the dynamic with the team, and I'm going to refer back to that Derek Gunn tweet that we talked about yesterday, I get more and more nervous about Nick Sirianni's ability to lead this team. I'll tell you straight up where I'm coming from, right? Because personally, I would not have brought back Nick Sirianni after last season. I would have moved on. I would have hired a different head coach. I would have said, I understand you took us to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, but heading into 2024, we need to go in a different direction. So that'll already tell you where I stand. Even before hearing this recent stuff that has come out, I would have already made a change at head coach. I would have moved on from Nick Sirianni. But that's just one man's opinion, and clearly the organization disagreed, being that they kept him. But again, I'll read you just the back half of this Derek Gunn tweet talking about what happened when Big Dom was suspended. It says, Big Dom suspended, controls Nick Sirianni's emotions on sideline. In his absence, Nick gets in numerous arguments with players and coaches during games. That's as damning as something gets. If you believe that that is the truth, and I have not been given any reason to doubt Derek Gunn, who is connected with the team and does have sources, I don't have any reason to doubt that that's what happened. Well, that's a major issue. And it's a major issue on top of the issues of the actual responsibilities that Nick Sirianni had when he took over here. Let's remember, back in 2021, he handed over play calling responsibilities to Shane Steichen just partway through the year, following a brutal loss to the Las Vegas Raiders. I was in that stadium. It was not a good time, and the team did not look good. And then they turned it around. And then in 2022, they go to the Super Bowl. So clearly, Nick Sirianni was not cutting it as the offensive play caller of this team. He made a poor decision last year with the defensive responsibilities, giving that to Matt Patricia and removing Sean Desai basically from that position, not in title, but in action. There's a lot that points back to Nick Sirianni when it comes to the issues currently facing this team. He's not the only person, but he is the top responsibility taker that's left, in my opinion. There is no more Brian Johnson to move on from. There is no more Sean Desai or Matt Patricia to move on from. This year, in 2024, because Nick Sirianni will be the head coach of this team this coming season, there is only one man that is on the hot seat. It's not Howie Roseman. It's not Jeffrey Lurie. It's not Kellen Moore. It's not Vic Fangio. Nick Sirianni is already in a position where people have questioned his ability to do this job. And my question to you to start the show, and you can chime in on this on the phone line, 610-632-0975. I'd love to hear from you. How much leash should the Eagles give to Nick Sirianni this season? What is the breaking point for the Birds when it comes to their current head coach? You might say that because they've brought him back and because this team is contending, he deserves to have the entirety of the season. That there's no situation where he shouldn't be able to at least finish the 2024 season. And then if it's not the result that you were looking for, you would end up moving on from the head coach. I am in a school of thought that Nick Sirianni may not have the entire year. I'm going to be realistic. I don't know that there is a guarantee that he makes it through this year as the head coach of this football team. And let me tell you why I feel that. Because the expectations are so high for this team that the bar is going to be set unbelievably high for Nick Sirianni. Think about it. What would he have to do for you as a fan of the Eagles to have confidence that he's had a successful season? If they make the playoffs next year and they go out in the first round just like they did this past year, would you feel more confident in Nick Sirianni as the head coach of this football team? How about this scenario? Let's say that they win a playoff game and then they go out in the second round of the postseason. There are still going to be a lot of fans that say that is an underachievement for the talent level of this team. Now, of course, this depends on how the roster is built. I'm not going to say that if they do nothing to improve the defense, Nick Sirianni, that's on him. Like, Howie Roseman has to still do his job, but I believe that he will, to some extent, improve this defense. And I believe the coordinators are going to do their jobs because I trust Kellen Moore's resume, and I absolutely trust Vic Fangio's resume on the defensive side of the ball. But my point is, short of an NFC championship game appearance, I think that this fan base is going to once again be calling for Nick Sirianni's job. And that's almost an unfairly high bar. But life isn't fair. We know for a fact the NFL isn't fair. And that is reality, at least to me, when it comes to the Philadelphia Eagles. So, short of going to the NFC Championship game, this could easily be the last year for Nick Sirianni as the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. And I want to know what the fan base's perspective is on this. I want to hear from you on the phone lines. Again, the numbers 610 632 0975. How much leash would you give to Nick Sirianni this year? If they start, I don't know, 2-5, is he gone? Like, is he getting the season? How quickly would you pull the hook on Nick Sirianni? He went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, right? He coached this team to within a possession of winning their second Lombardi. I'm not going to pretend like that didn't happen, and I'm not going to give him the credit he deserves for being the head coach of that team. But I'm also going to be realistic about the things we've learned about the way he coaches and the collapse that his team went through this past year and how that changes the narrative. So, what would be your breaking point on Nick Sirianni as head coach? Maybe you've already gotten there. Maybe you're like me and you say, I wouldn't have brought him back anyway. And in that case, you probably have a very low breaking point for this upcoming season. Maybe you're a Nick Sirianni believer. But even those with utmost faith in him have to admit that if this season ends in another first-round playoff exit or a divisional loss to a team like Dallas or San Francisco, that's going to drive this fan base insane. That's going to make us unhappy in the city. And that is going to be potentially an unacceptable result for the organization. With the bar so high, Nick Sirianni is on the hot seat firmly for 2024. And these new things we're hearing about his demeanor on the sidelines and needing Big Dom to calm him down so he doesn't yell at players and other coaches, that's only confirming what I thought when this past season ended. That the Eagles are in a very precarious spot when it comes to their head coach. And I worry that even if he does a good job this year, the bar has been set too high for him to win this fan base back over. What are your thoughts on the head coach? How do you feel about him? And what do you think he has as far as a leash from the organization this coming season? We're going to continue that conversation coming up. We're also going to touch on the latest in the A.J. Brown situation, which I think falls under the umbrella of Nick Sirianni's responsibilities. I really do. And I'll tell you why coming up on the other side. I'm Connor Thomas, filling in for Andrew Salchunas here on 97.5 Middays. We're back after this here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Fanatic Sports Update.
I'm Silvana Kelleher, and this update is brought to you by Wendy's. The Wendy's Biggie Bag comes with your choice of JBC or crispy chicken sandwich, plus 4-piece nugs, junior fries, and a small soft drink. U.S. price and participation may vary. Third-party delivery pricing may be higher. The Sixers fell to the New York Knicks last night at home, 119-96. Tyrese Maxey led the team with 35 points. Kyle Lowry's homecoming left him with stitches, but he did go back in the game and finished with 11 points, 5 assists, and 4 rebounds. The Sixers have the chance to bounce back tonight as they host the Cleveland Cavaliers. Tip-off is at 7:30, which you can catch here live on The Fanatic. The Flyers return to the ice tomorrow as they host the New York Rangers at 3 p.m. You can catch that game also live right here on The Fanatic. One more day until Phillies baseball. The Phils have their first spring training game tomorrow at 1:07 p.m. against the Blue Jays. 34 more days until the regular season commences at Citizens Bank Park. I'm Silvana Kelleher. Breaking sports news all day, every day is here. 97.5 The Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com.
Connor Thomas filling in for Andrew Salchunas. He'll be back on Monday as he finishes up vacation. And the Philadelphia Eagles will be back in the fall. But we still have drama surrounding this team. They have a busy offseason ahead of them. They've already done some work with the coaching staff, bringing in Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator, bringing in Vic Fangio as the defensive coordinator. But my question's about the head coach. I already lost faith in Nick Sirianni after the way this last season ended, but he remained as the head coach. Clearly, though, with the drawback of responsibilities on behalf of the organization, saying that, hey, buddy, we're going to need you to handle the offense less. You're kind of just the locker room, time management, decision-making on when we go for a guy. And I know there's more to his responsibilities than that, but the guy isn't calling the offense. He isn't calling the defense. He's proven that he is not up to the NFL standard when it comes to those things. And so the Eagles said, you're not doing it anymore, bud. So with that in mind, clearly the organization is not 100% sold on Nick Sirianni. I believe that there were real conversations that took place concerning his job security after this season. There had to have been. You don't take responsibilities away from a coach that you have 100% faith in. But I'm asking you, as part of the fan base, as an Eagles fan out there, how much leash should he get? What is the breaking point for Nick Sirianni in the 2024 season? Is it a slow start and he's gone? Is it a you have to make it to the postseason or you're gone? Is it even a postseason berth won't save you? Where are we at? There might be some people out there that say short of winning the Super Bowl or going to the Super Bowl, Nick Sirianni should move on, or rather the Eagles should move on from Nick Sirianni as their head coach. Now, I think that's setting the bar a little bit high, but this is product of failures of the past. The failure to call plays on the offensive side of the ball, a responsibility which Sirianni relinquished back in 2021. A failure to keep the team together this year in one of the worst collapses we've ever seen, not just in Philadelphia, in the sport. There are plenty of reasons to set a high bar for Nick Sirianni, and there are also plenty of reasons to believe that he will not meet that bar. And I'll tell you what, I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I like the guy. I do. I think he is a good person. I think he is a guy who has proven he can be a really good leader of men, and he was the coach of a team that got damn close to winning the Super Bowl and brought them to that point. But at the same time, this is a results-based business, the NFL. And this past year, he didn't come close to getting the result needed. And also, this is not a team that is just kind of putzing around in the middle of the NFL power rankings. The Eagles should be contenders. And the longer that you let a coach handle responsibilities for this team that doesn't seem to be able to get the job done, the more you kill the window of competition. There's going to be a time where Jalen Hurts' cap hit increases to a point where roster building becomes exceedingly difficult for Howie Roseman. I believe Howie will handle it because he has a track record of doing so. But it doesn't mean that it won't come without cuts of some sort. A harder time signing players. A harder time retaining players that are talented because more of your money is committed to the quarterback. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't have paid Jalen Hurts. No, that's the nature of having an elite level quarterback in the NFL. Paying a guy a big contract means that eventually you're going to have a hard time building the rest of the roster around them. So what that means to me is the Eagles' window is somewhat limited. In the time where you have a minimal cap hit on Jalen Hurts, you have to be competing for Super Bowl championships, especially with this talent that the Eagles have assembled on their roster. And if Nick Sirianni is not the guy to get that done, you cannot sit around for 2, 3, 4 years and watch him come up short. That's why the bar is set so high. That's why questions were asked about his position after this season, and that's why I know that they will continue to be asked as we get closer and head into the 2024 season later on this year. So, where's your faith level? Where's your breaking point on Nick Sirianni when it comes to this coming season? Do you think it's potentially an in-season firing if things don't go right? And also, if you're on the other side, if you're he deserves more credit. He deserves a full another year regardless. I have faith in Nick Sirianni. Make the argument because I am very far away from that at this point. And I'd love to hear you try and convince me that he deserves more credit than what I'm giving him. I've acknowledged the ability to lead this team to that Super Bowl appearance 2 years ago. I've acknowledged that he's had 3 playoff appearances here in Philadelphia in his 3 years as head coach. But I'm also not going to turn a blind eye to major collapse this year and a lot of questions being asked about his ability to keep the team together through adversity. That's just the reality of the situation. So you can let me know your thoughts on where Nick Sirianni stands in your mind at 610-632-0975. On top of that, let's revisit the A.J. Brown situation from yesterday because it is getting weirder by the day. I mean, it seems that now those critical tweets from his account might actually have been him. He's started to kind of respond, but not in any kind of direct manner. Bottom line is this, right? And we already had the conversation about the media's role in this and who you put blame on and who needs to change more when it comes to what A.J. Brown was saying about the media in Philly causing problems, stuff like that. Here's the bottom line. I am all for players expressing themselves. I am. I don't think that anybody should be, silenced or anything like that. No, you should have the right, regardless of if you play in the NFL or not, to voice your opinion on how you're feeling. Go out and if you're upset about something, say it. If you feel that you have commentary that needs to be made public, say it. But at some point, as with any line of employment, it's not just the NFL, any line of employment, if you say something that is detrimental to the team, to the organization, to the company you work for, in any line of work, the organization has a right to step in and be like, yo, you got to chill. I understand that you want to voice your opinions, but this is a bad look for the Philadelphia Eagles. This is a bad look for the organization. And I'm just saying there is a point that you get to of that. I don't know if A.J. Brown is there yet, but I will say that the added drama of what's going on with A.J. Brown right now is not a great look for a team that already collapsed. I'm not blaming A.J. Brown for the collapse. I'm not saying he was a locker room problem. I'm reacting to what's happening right now after the season has been well over. A team that has so much that needs to be fixed, that has questions about the head coach, that there are people saying that there's turmoil internally. These responses from A.J. Brown are not helping the narrative. And I think the team has to get control over this situation before something is said that truly causes some damage to the organization. I don't think that anything A.J. Brown has said to this point has been damaging to the Philadelphia Eagles, right? Even the stuff about, I think the media is lame here in Philadelphia and they should raise the price of microphones and headphones or whatever to get to the point where you actually have people doing this that should be doing. I don't even think that's damaging to the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that's one man's voicing his opinion. If it is indeed him, which we're still not sure, I haven't seen a Twitter conspiracy like this since the Colangelo burner gate. Thank goodness it's happened twice in the past decade here in Philadelphia. What are the chances of that? Anyway, we don't need to think about that anymore. The Sixers have their own problems. We're going to talk about the Sixers' problems and a specific player, Tobias, coming up later on in the show. But bottom line is, when you start to get in this whole social media war with media and fans and everything like that, and you've got a player who's creating drama for the team, which A.J. Brown is creating drama that points back towards the Philadelphia Eagles by doing this, at some point, the organization has to say, dude, you got to just log off, or you got to get whoever has control of your Twitter to give it back, or you got to get that account shut down or something. Like, you just have to go radio silence for us for a little bit, because this is not helping the situation. And I do think whether or not the A.J. Brown comments were from him or are from someone who has his account or whatever, like, having them be attributed back to him by his Twitter handle is a bad look. It just is. Whether it's him or not, it's a bad look. Like, I could say, if there were tweets coming out of my account that said, like, bad stuff about the Fanatic and people I work with here, and I was like, oh, well, I don't know, someone else logged into my account, I could absolve myself for a short period of time, but eventually if those tweets keep coming out, it's going to be a bad look for me, and it's going to be a bad look for the station. So that would be where someone would be like, yo, get your bleep together. Figure this out so that it stops negatively affecting us. And part of that, I think, falls on A.J. Brown, the individual, but part of that also falls on the team to direct him what's in the best interest of the team. But like I said, part of it falls on A.J. Brown, the individual. And this is an interesting question, right? And I have a concrete answer on this one, in my opinion. But with the recent drama from A.J. Brown, I want to ask you this. Have you gotten tired of this? Like, are you over it? Because no matter how talented a player is, eventually there is a point where you say, man, I'm just tired of having to talk about and listen to and worry about social media stuff and comments about things that don't pertain to football and unnecessary drama and things of that nature. And I know he's a great wide receiver, but at some point it's too much. Now, me personally, I'm not there yet with A.J. Brown. I don't know that I'm even close to that point with A.J. Brown, because this dude is so important to the Philadelphia Eagles' success. He is the best wide receiver that has worn an Eagles uniform since Terrell Owens. And unless he comes out and says something like, Jalen Hurts stinks, or I hate the city of Philadelphia, his talent is outweighing the negative effects of any drama that spawns from his Twitter account or him or any comments he makes. Let's be real. Like, people like to pretend like there's no preferential treatment, that everyone should be held to the same standard. But especially in sports, the greater your talent, the more you can say and get away with. And A.J. Brown's talent is immense. So I'm not remotely in a spot where I'm questioning whether or not I want A.J. Brown to be a member of the Philadelphia Eagles. Like, I want this dude here. I want him as a part of this team. I want him to be Jalen Hurts' number one option. He is a very valuable football player, and I don't think that he is a locker room problem. But not being a locker room problem doesn't mean that statements about the media or about the fan base don't adversely affect the Philadelphia Eagles. So I'll ask you out there, like, you root for the team. A lot of you have this man's jersey. Like, I've seen it in Kelly Green more times than I can count. So those are recent purchases from this past year. He is the best offensive skill player on this team. But have you had enough of the drama surrounding A.J. Brown? Not to the point like, oh, just get him out of the city even, but I'm just wondering where the breaking point is on this. We talked about the breaking point with Nick Sirianni as head coach and what his performance has to be to earn him another year past this one. But when you look at A.J. Brown, like, if I had this conversation, I'll just put it this way so that people understand where I'm coming from. If I had this conversation in the year 2004, when it came to Terrell Owens, everyone would have been like, dude, he's unbelievable. What are you trying to run him out of this city? We're never going to get tired of it. Do you see how many touchdowns he has this year? Like, he's going to make, you remember he was going to make Andy Reid wear like that the skin tight suit or whatever if he scored a certain number of touchdowns, and then unfortunately had the leg injury and didn't get to that point. But like, we loved T.O. in this town. And nobody would have believed in 2004 that there was a way that the T.O. drama could make us tired of him. And then a year later, next thing you know, he's doing sit-ups in the driveway and questioning the quarterback, and next thing you know, he no longer plays for the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm not sure that A.J. Brown is going to get to that point. Like, I don't think that this is going to end the way that the Terrell Owens situation ended. But the reason I bring that up is to say this. Eventually, there is a breaking point regardless of the talent. Even the greatest players of all time, if they are causing headaches for the fan base or for the organization off the field, then there's going to be a point where people are like, man, I'm just kind of over this. I just don't want to hear it anymore. I just don't want the drama anymore. There is fatigue when it comes to anything that happens outside the realm of the sport. And this is why I'm not there with A.J. Brown, because none of his off-the-field issues are what I would even term off-the-field issues. Like, when I think off-the-field issues, I think about someone getting arrested, someone, like, getting popped for PEDs or whatever, like something like that that keeps them unavailable from the team, something that makes them a bad person, like in their personal life, and makes them unavailable or unlikely for you to root for them. That's not A.J. Brown at all. Like, he's not remotely in that stratosphere, which is why I haven't come close to the thought of, well, am I over this whole A.J. Brown with the Eagles thing? But I know that people are tired of it out there. And I wonder what tired of it means to you. Like, how is this changing how much you like A.J. Brown as a member of the Philadelphia Eagles? Or is this more of an annoyance in the offseason and something you'll move on from the second he catches a touchdown in 2024? You can let me know at 610-632-0975. It's just the word I keep thinking of when I think of this situation is unnecessary, right? I don't want to silence anyone's opinion on anything, but there are times where not commenting on something, where radio silence, where just staying off social media and not making any commentary is the right way to go. I think after the season the Philadelphia Eagles had, silence is probably a virtue for them right now. And A.J. Brown has been not silent the past couple of days when it comes to all of the stuff surrounding his social media and what he might say next about how media interacts with him and what he might say about the team. Like, I don't know what A.J. Brown's going to say next. The Eagles probably don't know what A.J. Brown's going to say next. Or if there's someone else in charge of his Twitter account, we don't know what that person's going to say. So I'm just saying, like, get a hold of this situation, because I know there's already building fan base fatigue when it comes to unnecessary drama surrounding the Eagles. I'll let you in on a little something. The Eagles, the way their season ended this past year, they created enough drama with their failures on the football field. We have enough to talk about when it comes to how you're going to rebuild this defense and whether or not the head coach can still coach, and if you trust the coordinator, and who's going to retire and who's going to stay, and the leadership of this team going forward, and if they're going to be able to put together a team that competes in the NFC. Like, that is going to be enough of a conversation that we don't need is there some random person on A.J. Brown's Twitter account tweeting out stuff about how the media is lame and everything like that? It feels unnecessary. And I need the Eagles to get a hold of that situation before it turns into a complete sideshow. None of that means that I don't want A.J. Brown here as a football player. None of that means I don't respect his play on the field. And none of that means I'm even questioning his integrity as a person. I don't think this is a matter of good or bad. It's a matter of necessary or unnecessary. It's a matter of feel for what this organization is going through right now with the collapse they went, and knowing the temperament of the fan base and probably the organization as a whole, because they're not happy with the way the season ended either. And understanding that probably everybody should just take a step back from everything this offseason and focus on getting back to where they need to be in 2024 and competing. You win the Super Bowl, say whatever you want. You go out in the first round to Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Probably good to be quiet for a couple of months, and that's just something that's been an annoyance this offseason that we didn't need with a team that already annoyed us with what they did or didn't do on the football field. 610-632-0975 is the phone number to join the program today. And how are you feeling? Where is your fatigue level on Nick Sirianni as the head coach? Like, what type of leash are you giving him? And with the A.J. Brown situation, where is your fatigue level on the drama that seems to surround him? I'm not saying he's even causing it. If it's somebody else on his Twitter account, it's entirely not his fault. But at some point, you got to take ownership of that, and you got to either get your account back, shut that down, or say something, because he hasn't come out and outright denied this is 100% me. I don't know who has my account. Don't listen to anything they're saying. No, he's playing into it at some places on his Instagram and posts like that. Just the sideshow stuff. We don't need it right now when it comes to the Philadelphia Eagles. And I need someone to get a handle on this situation before it turns into not just critiques of the media, but critiques of the team, critiques of the fan base, more stuff that we don't need when it comes to the circus surrounding the Eagles. That's where I'm at right now. Very interested where everybody else is as well. Now, I wanted to lead with the Eagles stuff because I believe that it's very compelling what's going on with them right now. And the Sixers still have a way to go. Last night was their first game back from the All-Star break. And there are still some injuries facing this team. And they played a really good team in the New York Knicks. And there's still time in the season for the Sixers to figure out what's going on, right? The Eagles are already in hot water because of the way their season ended. The Sixers, they have time to figure some stuff out. I don't know how much faith I have that they will, but they have time to figure it out. But my goodness, I reached an absolute breaking point with a player last night in that game against the New York Knicks. And I can't sit here behind this microphone and not bring up my complete disappointment with what I saw last night at the Wells Fargo Center. We're going to get into that coming up. I saw on social media last night an outpouring of commentary about exactly who I'm talking about. And I got to be honest, I'm done. I've reached a breaking point. We'll discuss it coming up on who my breaking point is with. I'm sure you can guess. And what in the world the Sixers do about it as we continue the midday show here. I'm Connor Thomas filling in for Andrew Salchunas. We're back after this here on 97.5, The Fanatic.
Fanatic Sports Update.
I'm Savannah Kelleher, and this update is brought to you
Salchunas. 97.5 The Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com.
Connor Thomas back live with you, filling in for Andrew Salchunas here on 97.5 Middays. The Chunas will be back on Monday as he returns from vacation. 10 o'clock hour is brought to you by Window Nation. Take advantage of Window Nation's 50% off sale on all style windows. Plus, make no down payment with no payments and no interest for 12 full months. Call 866-90-NATION or visit windownation.com. I'm done with this particular player, and I think a lot of you are out there as well. Last night, the Sixers play the Knicks. It's the Kyle Lowry homecoming game. I'll tell you what, Kyle Lowry had a nice game. He really did. I liked what he did on both sides of the ball. He seemed to initiate the offense really well. I don't think it should be that surprising, considering he's familiar with Nick Nurse's system. Like, it's a coach that he's played for before, so it's not a totally new experience for him coming here, but still, to have not played for as long as he did, remember, like Miami moved him to Charlotte, and then he reached a buyout without playing for the Hornets, and then you had the All-Star break. It wasn't like Kyle Lowry was just coming in here fresh off of playing 2 days ago. Like, he had a little bit of time off. That was impressive what he did. And the Sixers were down 26 at one point in that game. They came back to cut it to 6 points late. They made it interesting, and then they just didn't have the closeout ability. Like, they couldn't stay tight late in the game. Okay, all of that is somewhat understandable, considering the injuries they're dealing with and everything like that. Like I get it. But that's even more of a reason why I just have to talk about Tobias Harris today. I do. And I'm going to try and say this in the nicest way possible. Like, I'm trying to be respectful. He is a professional athlete and a talented one. And he's been given in this town many opportunities to take a just dominant role on the court. Think about all the times that Joel Embiid has been hurt, and there have been a lot of them since Tobias Harris has been here. And on all those teams, Tobias Harris has been either the second or third option, right? Like, he has been expected to be the guy that steps up if Joel Embiid goes down. He is the veteran leader of this team. And ask anyone around the Sixers. Like, Tobias Harris is a leader in that locker room. He is. But, man, on the court, every time he's given an opportunity to step up when Joel Embiid goes down, he comes up short. He disappears in the moment. I know Andrew, who normally sits in his seat, calls him Tobias the Friendly Ghost for the way that he disappears in moments. And last night was a complete disappearance. He scored 7 points in the game. He had, 5 rebounds, 3 assists? Like, that is an unacceptable stat line. He is a max contract player, and it's just not right to expect him to play like a max contract player at this point. We've seen enough of Tobias Harris on this contract to know that it is an overpayment. I don't blame him for that. Get the money you're worth, right? If I was getting paid way more than I was worth here, I would still take the paycheck. And you would do the same at your job. So I'm not going to fault him for the amount of money he makes, but when you get paid that amount of money, it comes with expectation. And one of those expectations is when the best player on the team goes down, you need to step up your game, not fade into obscurity to the point where you wonder, was he even on the floor? Like, I remember that point last night when I realized Tobias Harris was playing, and it was in the fourth quarter. I said, my goodness, has this dude done anything tonight? And I went and I checked the box score, and at the point he had 5 points. I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, at some point, you have to just reach a breaking point with certain players. And you can keep believing in them, but you're going to get burned time and time and time again until you realize they are what they are. And I'll tell you what Tobias Harris is. Tobias Harris is a solid NBA player. He is. He is a talented basketball player who was really good in moments throughout his career. And overall, when you look at what his resume is, he is a solid NBA basketball player. Not deserving of the contract he has right now, but a solid player nonetheless. He's not like, this guy's a bum, get him out of the league. Like, no, he's better than that. But unfortunately, for the Philadelphia 76ers, I think it's only fair to say that Tobias Harris has proven he is a player that in the big moments is not stepping up. He is not taking over the game. There are some players that, when given an opportunity, play above and beyond how they normally do. There are players that are, and we define those guys as clutch, or, he's a dog. He's going to take over the game. Like, you know that when they get an opportunity, when someone goes down and they step up, they're going to play lights out. Like, and some weird players have games like that. The one that comes to mind, and it's a funny example. I'm not saying this guy is a better basketball player than Tobias, because we saw plenty of this player in the city too. But I think about the Shake Milton game against the Clippers years ago when he just went off and was just cooking Paul George, like a monster performance from Shake Milton, where it was just like, he got an opportunity and he took over a game. And I'm not saying, Shake Milton has that dog in him, Tobias Harris doesn't, because Shake Milton is not like a great NBA player by any stretch of the imagination. My point is, though, like, every once in a while, having one of those big games happens for players from average level to great level to even sometimes players that are not average NBA players, below average NBA players, sometimes run into one. What makes you a great NBA player and one worthy of the contract Tobias Harris has is that you are more often than not a positive impact on the game. And when your team needs you, you are a trusted player that steps up when the going gets tough. It seems like when the going gets tough for the Philadelphia 76ers, Tobias Harris steps down. And I don't think that makes him a bad basketball player, but it makes him a tough person to have faith in when your expectation is to compete in the Eastern Conference and to compete for a championship. Like, last night was the perfect encapsulation of what Tobias Harris has been for this team. You know he has the skills. You know he has the ceiling to be great. But when the team needs him most, he's not that guy. And it's not that every time he only has 7 points, but sometimes it might be 12. Sometimes it might be 15. But he's a guy that should have more than that in the tank when Joel Embiid is not there. And when DeAnthony Melton still isn't playing. And when you have a 26-point deficit cut to 6 points and your team is fighting back and you have a chance to snatch that game from a team that is a contender in the Eastern Conference, and you just don't have any impact on that game at all? Like, that's the point where, and I have respect for Tobias Harris, I do, but I got to call it as I see it. And I don't know that he is going to be much of a help for the Sixers this year. Or at least, not that he's not capable of doing it, but that I can't put my faith in him. He's not consistent enough. And last night was a golden opportunity for him to show us that he can step up in Embiid's absence. And he didn't do that. Tyrese Maxey steps up when Joel Embiid goes down. Like, Kyle Lowry had a great game. We're going to talk more about Kyle Lowry and some stuff that was said about him that I don't necessarily agree with. But I can't sit around and watch Tobias Harris anymore and have any belief that he's going to get the Sixers into a position where they're going to be successful. That doesn't mean the Sixers can't win, right? When Embiid comes back, Tobias Harris goes back to being the third or fourth option on this team. And he can be a third or fourth option because the value of that player is a little bit less. Like, you don't need them as much. But he has so much responsibility on this team that he cannot afford to have games like he did last night. And too many times in his career, he's shrunk from the moment, it seems. And that's not what you need when you're competing for a championship. So as of last night, and I tried to hold out hope. I really did. I tried to stay with this guy as long as I could and give him the benefit of the doubt because I see the potential that's there with Tobias Harris. I've seen the good games. Much like we talked about with Nick Sirianni, how I'm not going to ignore the fact that he was the coach of this team on the way to a Super Bowl appearance and nearly a Super Bowl victory. I'm not going to ignore the fact that Tobias Harris has a high ceiling as a basketball player. But sometimes players with high ceilings don't rise to the occasion as often as you would want them to. And at this point, I'm resigned to the school of thought that Tobias Harris is not going to get the job done for the Philadelphia 76ers. Doesn't mean they can't win, but it means that my expectations for this team without Joel Embiid have dropped a little bit because I can no longer put my faith in Tobias Harris. I just can't do it. 610-632-0975 is the phone number to jump into the show today. And I have to acknowledge this, right? Because this is part of the equation. But Kate Scott joined the John Kincaid show earlier today, and she had a bunch to say, actually, but something to say about what the Sixers are doing right now injury-wise and what they have to try and overcome. And it is a realistic part of the conversation, especially when it comes to Tobias, to have. Because this is a tall task for the Sixers that they're being asked to overcome right now. So I want you to hear what Kate Scott had to say about what Nick Nurse is facing with the injuries currently plaguing his basketball team.
I feel like at times Nick is back to coaching a G League team just because of we don't know who's going to be available every night because of the health of everyone else, not just Joel Embiid. And forgive me if my memory is incorrect this morning, but I don't remember that being the case last year. It was Joel's out, but the rest of the team is the same. And Joel's back in, and then we've got the rest of the team around him. But right now it's, okay, Joel's out, and 2 or 3 or 4 other guys aren't out. But which guys are those? So what team do we want to throw out tonight? Okay, there's a new guy coming in. Let's try to integrate him into the team as well.
It's a very fair point. And that's more a defense of the team and a defense of Nick Nurse in general. Kate Scott's correct. This is a really tough injury situation that the Sixers have been dealing with for about a month and change now. And part of that is acknowledging how difficult it would be for the Sixers to step up in total, right? They're not expected to win these games. They're not expected to beat contenders in the Eastern Conference with multiple starters out. And they are having, or rather I should say Nick Nurse is having, a tough time putting lineups together with this team. I acknowledge all of that. So if you were the head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers and you're saying, I got different guys available every night. I got new guys from the trade deadline I'm trying to integrate into this offense and defense and just the system in general. I have a lot of uncertainties. Who would you call upon to make sure that the team stays competitive during that time? Because to me, it would be your highest paid available player, a veteran player that's been here for years and is very comfortable in the city and has been here for a long time in Tobias Harris, and it has been a long time at this point, and one that just has a high ceiling as a basketball player. If you could build in a lab a calming influence on a team on the floor, you would build a player like Tobias Harris. Unfortunately, it seems that when those opportunities arise, Tobias Harris becomes not that player. And that is just unacceptable. And it makes it very difficult to win, and it makes me question the ceiling of this Sixers team. So last night was my breaking point with Tobias Harris. It just was. In spite of the injuries and everything, in spite of playing a really good team in the New York Knicks, credit to them for that victory last night, I'm tired of seeing the disappearing act every time he gets an opportunity to lead this team. And there's another question on that we're going to get into coming up. But I want to hear some of your thoughts on Tobias Harris and what you all saw last night. You all watched the game. I'm sure there's frustration out there as well. The phone number, again, 610-632-0975. Let's go to Frank in Middletown next. Frank, you're live here on the Fanatic.
Yeah, hello?
Hey, Frank. What's up?
Yeah, how are you?
I'm good.
Yeah, the frustration about Tobias Harris for me it's been the longest. I didn't even expect him to be back on this team after the trade deadline. I really thought they were going to put a trade package together to get marketing from the Jazz.
Yeah.
The one thing that hurt me last night about Tobias, it's one thing if you're not making shots. Number two, Tobias has no aggression whatsoever, right? He literally stepped back for anybody else to take a shot besides him, right? And then come to think about it, Josh Hart had 12 rebounds last night. Tobias Harris had 5.
Right.
One of the reasons why the Sixers got beat. They got out-rebounded.
100. Especially down the stretch, Frank. There were so many times they had chances to get out of stretches, and they just didn't rebound the ball.
But think that just for 1 second, Tobias would just show himself as an ultimate veteran and a professional that's able. Because I think Tobias, like you said, I think he has the skills, he has the confidence to get the job done. But for whatever reason, he's just not into it. And I'm like you said, I'm tired of the Tobias narrative. He has to go. It's over with. There's no hope in him. Bogdanovich off the bench last night came up and put up 22 points on the Sixers.
Yeah.
The kid off the bench, Kevin Martin, had 7 rebounds, and you're paying this guy $36 million, and you can't get 20 points out of him.
Frank, I'm with you, man, and I appreciate the call. That's where I think a lot of people are at with Tobias Harris right now. It's not that he's not a talented basketball player. It's not that he doesn't have an NBA skill set. It's that when he gets tailor-made opportunities that seem to scream, Tobias, tonight's the night you have to step up. It's the nights that he doesn't show up. It's mind-numbing. It really is. He's gotten so many chances to prove that this is not the player he is. And every time you consider putting your faith in him, you get a 7-point game in a gettable game in a win that you could have desperately used. And I don't know. I don't know how anyone can put their faith in Tobias Harris any longer when it comes to what he can bring to this team in a leadership on the court role. I'm not talking leadership as a person. I still think he is a great leader as a person. I'm not questioning that about him at all. I know he's a good dude. Does a lot of great stuff. But ultimately, you're paid to play basketball. And you're paid the amount you are because the belief is when Joel Embiid is not available, you step up. Not the 23-year-old. No. Tyrese Maxey stepping up is a bonus. What he's done this year is unbelievable. And he deserves a lot of credit for that, but that's not the expectation. That's an extra that Tyrese Maxey has developed the way he has. The expectation for Tobias Harris, indicated by the contract, is that when you don't have your big guy, Tobias Harris has to go get you 20-plus. He's got to go get you 8-plus boards. He's got to be an impact maker on the floor to say, I don't care if Embiid's playing or not. I'm out here, and I'm going to make sure the Sixers are competitive. And instead, it seems to fall on everybody else. And he just goes by the wayside. And that's just, I got to be honest, I'm tired of it. I really am. 610-632-0975 is the number to jump into the program. And I want to ask you because, it was a question just asked by our last caller. Does this make you think about whether or not the Sixers should have traded Tobias Harris at the trade deadline? We'll talk about why that's a realistic question to ask. And I'd love to hear if, in hindsight, you wish the Sixers would have done something differently about the way they handled the deadline. I like the acquisitions, but was there a move they didn't make? Potentially trading Tobias Harris that is going to come back to haunt them. We'll get into that coming up and continue this conversation on the Sixers. I'm Connor Thomas in for Andrew Salchunas here on 97.5 Middays. We're back after this here on 97.5 The Fanatic. Connor Thomas back live with you here, filling in for Andrew Salchunas. Silvana Keller are on the board. And, I mean, I'm not even, mad at Tobias Harris. I'm just disappointed, right? I feel like that upset parent where it's just like, I know you can be better than this. But I'm giving you the opportunity to be. You're just not taking it. That's the thing. Like, when Tobias Harris's time is done as a Philadelphia 76er, short of something changing this postseason, because it won't matter in the regular season, but short of something changing this postseason, maybe this team finds a way to go on a miraculous run and they win the East or they win the finals or something, his time will be marked by missed opportunities. There was a chance for him last night to step up and to show that he is going to be a piece that helps this team the amount you would expect a player of his caliber to do so with Joel Embiid out, and he didn't get it done. He didn't even come close to getting it done. 7 points. You just can't expect that from a player of his caliber, especially when you need him to step up in the wake of injuries, and he just hasn't done it consistently enough. So I was already at a point where I knew he was inconsistent, but last night was the breaking point for me where I'm like, I've had enough of the missed opportunities to step up for this team from Tobias Harris. That's just where I'm at. We're going to talk more about that coming up at noon. Austin Krell is going to join us. Austin Krell covers the team. He knows the Sixers inside and out. I'm going to get his perspective on the Tobias Harris conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about where this team is, because I worry about where their seeding's going to end up. We'll discuss more about that. But I'm trying not to be unfair to Tobias Harris, because I know how this city feels about him. He signed that contract, and it was probably an overpay at the time. It clearly looks like one now. But I think a lot of people fault him for the amount of money he's earned. And that's not really his fault. If anything, we should be blaming the organization for giving that type of money to a player who isn't stepping up. When you say, oh, that's a bad contract, it's rare that we blame the player for a bad contract, but for some reason, Tobias Harris catches heat for that. So I'm trying to be fair to him, and I'm not going to blame him for the amount of money he's earning, but even if he hadn't gotten a max contract, he would have gotten a substantial amount of money to play basketball in this city or another city. And with that comes the expectation that you step up in big spots. And he has not done that in numerous opportunities over years and years here in Philadelphia. There are a lot of reasons why the Philadelphia 76ers have not gone where they wanted to go in the postseason. Joel Embiid's injury history, the coaching of this team. Yeah, you're going to have a bit of a Doc Rivers revenge game, people are calling it, coming up when the Sixers take on the Bucks this weekend. But, when I look at it, I just say Tobias Harris is part of the reason that the Sixers have not maximized their potential. Because in moments where he needs to step up, where he needs to play like a player that has the ceiling that he does, the moment seems to be too big for him more often than not. And that's unacceptable for a team that's competing for a championship like the Philadelphia 76ers. 610-632-0975 is the number to join the program. Let's go back to the phones. Let's talk to Chris in Delaware next. Chris, you're live here on the Fanatic.
Hey, Connor, my fellow Delaware guy, Frank, said a lot of the things that I wanted to say, so, it's quite obvious.
Yeah.
With Tobias, and we all see it. But it's just the lack of effort and energy, not just from him, from a lot of the, other guys besides Max. Healed shot was off last night. But, the Knicks were shooting lights out, and that's going to happen. But when they missed, how many times did they get the offensive rebound? Every time.
Especially down the stretch, man. It seemed like the Sixers had that game in their sights, and then it was just possession after possession. They couldn't rebound the basketball.
When they got to 6, it seemed the Knicks put the game away on second chances and third chances. I remember a couple of times when, there's a rebound, offensive rebound, defensive rebound, and Tobias standing there at the side of the rim, and, with his arms at his side, basically, as the ball whizzes by his head. It's just, I just didn't understand the effort. When Kenyon Martin and Rick Council bring more energy than the guys making the big bucks, you know, I know they're playing for their lives and their careers, but still, you know,
Right.
But you know, that's all obvious. But you were saying before the break about, you know, why didn't they trade Tobias at the deadline?
Yeah.
Well, I think I'm in full agreement with what they did. They got the players that they could to try to make a run this year if and when Joel comes back.
Mm-hmm.
But I would not have been in favor of them moving Tobias for another contract. You know, even if it was an expiring contract. You know, because who could they have acquired that would have been worth you know, re-signing at that money? So I back them going into next season with all this cap room, and they need to, you know, they need to go star hunting, and they need to get guys who are killers, the guys that want to win around Maxey and whoever else comes back. And Joel, please.
Chris,
please, you know, they want.
Yeah, it's a great call, man. I appreciate you checking in. Forgive me if I don't love the term star hunting anymore. Star hunting, like Brett Brown wanted to do back in the day. But, yeah, that's the argument in favor of why Tobias Harris is still here. Because he is coming off the books at the end of this year. His contract is expiring. And the cap space flexibility in the offseason is a huge asset for the Philadelphia 76ers going forward. Here's what I think, though, as well. Here's the argument for moving him. And I like all the moves the Sixers made. Like, I like the Buddy Hield acquisition. I like the Cameron Payne acquisition. I like the Kyle Lowry signing. Like, I think those were all smart moves. I'm not saying that I disagree with any of those. But when I see a player like Tobias Harris, I say, okay, he isn't performing up to his contract. He is shying away from the moment. But if you could have gotten something comparable this year for a player that is just going to shrink from every opportunity he gets to step up for this team, you might have been able to put yourself in a better spot. I thought ahead of the trade deadline that continuity was going to be a key factor. Moving Tobias Harris is changing too much. When Joel Embiid gets back, he's going to have to learn how to play with another player that he's not used to. And Joel Embiid has talked about continuity like the Nuggets have had. The Nuggets have kept that same core together for years, and it only just paid off last year with their first championship. So that would be the argument in favor of keeping Tobias. I just say, how good is continuity if when opportunity comes for that player, they don't seize it? Like, I wonder if I overstated in my assessment of I want Tobias Harris to be here still, the amount of impact he's going to have. Because last night has me hugely down on what he can bring to the Philadelphia 76ers when he gets his opportunities to be the guy for this team or one of the guys for this team. So that's where I'm at. Would you have moved him at the trade deadline? Or what do you think about the Sixers' decision to not trade Tobias Harris? Because after last night, it feels like you're going to have a very low impact next couple of months. We'll see where the Sixers end up. And then there's a chance he walks for absolutely nothing back for the Sixers besides cap room, which is valuable. Great point by our last caller, but you could have done more with that asset of Tobias Harris. There would have been teams that were somewhat interested in him. That's just where I'm at, and I'm wondering how you feel about how the Sixers handled that in not trading Tobias Harris. 610-632-0975. Let's go to Carlos in South Philly next. Carlos, you're live here on the Fanatic.
Hey, how you doing? Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm sure that the good general manager explored the idea of moving Tobias. I'm sure they have. I agree with you. I wish they would have got a player that was more dynamic, more aggressive, somebody that at least had a hunger to go out and compete. It's almost as if watching Tobias, it's like, I got my $180 million. I got my $36 million. I made it. Look at me, Mom. I made it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it looks like he's just dialing it in. And, I'm sure the Sixers explored it, but I think when they signed him, I said to my best friend, him and I are really huge fans. I said it was a fool's gold contract. I think, Tobias should be, worshiping his agent for getting him that deal. And I never thought it was a great deal. And I think the Sixers probably did look into trying to move him, but I think the rest of the league and their general managers realized that, his contract is not a contract they want to be any part of, even if it's only for a short period of time.
Yeah.
this year.
Now there are teams that would take an expiring contract just to clear that if you were going to acquire backup player who had multiple
Sure.
years that they didn't like. But you make a strong point. Like, a trade has two sides, and if there was enough interest in Tobias Harris for a player that could help the Sixers win, that would make sense why the deal wasn't done.
Yeah, I just think too many times the general managers in the league, they see a player has a really good year, and right away they think like, okay, we got to lock this guy up because if he's a huge talent. If we don't lock him up, somebody else is going to take him, and he's going to come back to haunt us. And then they give these guys these big contracts. And then what you see is, whoa, wait a second, Jordan Poole, Tobias Harris. You see guys that start to play, and you start to question, like, wait a second, how did this guy get this deal? And you start to wonder, like what's the mentality of the general managers? Are they just afraid that if they don't lock a guy up and he goes somewhere else, they'll look like a fool? They'll have egg on their face. It makes you stop and ponder that idea. But certainly it's hard to watch Tobias Harris in those big games where you really need him to step up, and he's non-existent. So
Right. Yeah, Carlos, you're spot on.
I think a big thing people forget, he's very beloved in the city because he does a lot in the city, and he's a really nice guy.
He is.
Just because you're a nice guy doesn't mean we got to keep you and we got to be loyal to you.
100% right, Carlos, and I appreciate the call, man. Thank you for checking in. Yeah, like, whether you could have moved him or not, I'm not sure. Right? I don't know to what level the Sixers shopped Tobias Harris. I just look at the impact he had on the game last night, which was minimal, if any, and I say, maybe I was too confident that he is an impact player for this team. And maybe I put faith in him too much, even though I was aware of his inconsistencies. I will tell you this, right? I don't know that it's effort. I don't know that it's he got paid and now he doesn't try anymore, because we saw this from the Tobias Harris prior to getting the max contract. I don't think it's effort. Like, I don't think Tobias Harris is the type of player to go out there and not play. He doesn't seem to have the makeup of someone who would quit on the team or not care or not try. It doesn't look like not trying. It looks like he's too passive, which are two totally different things, right? Not trying is someone who goes out there and is like, I don't really care. I'll shoot a shot here. I'll shoot a shot there. I'll take it easy. You know who's a great example of not trying? He plays up in Brooklyn right now. Ben Simmons was a not trier. He was someone who quit on his team. He was someone who refused to play the game of basketball. That's what someone without effort looks like. I don't think Tobias's issue is a lack of effort or a lack of trying. I think he just plays the game too passive to be the guy. Think about Tyrese Maxey and how he attacks. Like, you will see Tyrese Maxey emotional in a game when he doesn't get a foul call, like going at the basket, going at people, meeting someone at the top, trying to lay the ball in, like attacking the opposing team. He wants it. Like, you'll see Joel Embiid, confrontation at the rim, going after somebody, like hard blocks, dunking as hard and ferociously as he can, attacking the basketball, attacking the rim. You'll see that from other players on the team as well. Tobias just never seems to have that fire in him. And some people have different personality types, right? But I'll tell you this, Joel Embiid off the court, if you've ever heard him talk, if you've ever had the chance to run into him or see him kind of meander around, he's not really a fiery person off the basketball court. He's like, oh, okay, this, that, and the other thing. Like, that's his demeanor away from the court. But when he gets out there, he is a monster. He wants the game. He's going to rip it away from you if you try and take it. He is going to beat you. And I just don't know that Tobias Harris has that fire. Like, one time, just one damn time, I want to see Tobias Harris take a ball and go coast to coast and don't pass it, don't lay it up. Just try and hammer somebody into the earth's crust. Like, act like you are getting paid the amount of money you are. Act like you're as good of a basketball player as you are. Try and take the game away from someone. And I don't think it's because he's not trying. I don't think it's because he doesn't want to. I just think his makeup as a basketball player is too inconsistent and too passive. And that's an unacceptable thing, especially considering the situation that the Philadelphia 76ers are in right now with all the injuries that they're facing and everything of that nature. So you might look at that and say it's a lack of effort from Tobias. I don't know that I'd say that because he doesn't strike me as that type of person or that type of player. But passive is something different and just as deadly for a team if you're counting on a guy who has that type of really personality on the basketball floor about him. The number again to join in. We're talking about your reaction to a very underwhelming game from Tobias Harris and a question as to whether or not the Sixers should have tried harder to move him at the trade deadline, considering he has an expiring contract. And last night seemed to be a indication that he's not going to be able to help this team stay afloat. What are your thoughts on that on the phone lines? Let's go to Brandon in North Philly next. Brandon, you're live here on the Fanatic.
What's up, Connor? How you doing?
Doing good. How about yourself, man?
Good. So I like Toby. He's a good player. I feel like he could be, even better if he does step up. Mm-hmm. But I honestly think that Nick's coaching lost us this game because you saw how the way that KJ was guarding Jalen.
Yeah.
And we were getting out rebounded and stuff. Like I feel like if Nick told Toby, like sit like the next like 10 minutes, whatever, and maybe play Ricky or KJ the last, I feel like we could have won the game, honestly, because we were going on that run without him, and then we just kind of, as soon as Toby got in, we kind of just like lost the momentum. Like there was nothing that he could add to you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, but here's the thing from the coach's perspective. Like, sure, you may win that game last night if you play KJ over Tobias. Like, you might steal that game from the Knicks and have that momentum coming out of the All-Star break. But ultimately, you can't exist in a world without Joel Embiid if Tobias Harris is unplayable. And I think Nick Nurse was basically saying by continuing to play Tobias, like, dude, you have to step up for us. It can't just be like KJ Martin, because if we're relying on KJ Martin tonight, then that's us having to rely on him in the future, and he's not that type of player. Like, he's not. He's a fringe player on this team and solid athlete, but not a main role player on a competitive team. I think Nick Nurse had to keep Tobias in the game because you can't do anything with Joel Embiid out if Tobias Harris is not playing up to his potential.
Yeah, but that's the thing, though. Like, if Toby's not stepping up, and you've seen it through the 3 quarters already, he has 5 points. At that point, like, well, he's just gonna show off in the last like 10 minutes and give you 25. You know what I mean? It's just like,
no, you're right. You're absolutely right, Brandon. I appreciate the call. Like, I don't think anyone had faith in Tobias Harris to change that game last night late in it. We'd already seen that it was one of those performances where he's just non-existent. But as the head coach, it's almost like, dude, you got to figure this out. This has to work out. You have to be a player for us or we're not going anywhere. So you almost have to, it's kind of like going down with the ship as the captain. Like, you have to live and die by Tobias Harris playing basketball for this team. If you don't want to do that, you should have moved him at the trade deadline. You should have gotten someone in here that you trust more than that, or gotten someone in here at all that you can use. But I'm not saying Tobias Harris is useless. I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying if you're going to sit him for KJ Martin last night because he was defending Jalen Brunson well, and just keep Tobias Harris, your highest paid player available, and really who should be your best player, Tyrese Maxey had an unbelievable rise to where he is right now, and he is your best player. But Tobias Harris was supposed to be that guy. And if you're going to keep him on the bench in the clutch moments against the Knicks team that is a competitor in the Eastern Conference, what does that say about your confidence level in Tobias Harris? As much as we can say, I'm out on Tobias now, and I don't have any faith in him anymore, the Sixers can't get to that point because they're going to need him. So they have to hold out hope that eventually Tobias Harris is going to become that player. I think it's silly, but they have no other options. We do have options as fans because we're not coaching the team. We're not in the locker room with them every day. We're not required to put our faith in them if they have not earned it. And I think we're well past the point where we know that Tobias Harris has not earned our faith in him to be a consistent top player on this team. It's just not what he's going to be. And that's why last night was the straw that broke the camel's back for me when it comes to Tobias Harris's ability to step up for this basketball team. We've seen it year after year after year. And last night was the one where I was like, yeah, this is it. I've seen this movie enough times. I know how it ends. I know how it's always going to end. I'm done with it. That's where I'm at. I'm defeated when it comes to believing in Tobias Harris, at least as like a takeover type of basketball player. 610-632-0975 is the number to jump into the program. Where are you at with your thoughts on the Sixers and Tobias Harris and that performance last night? A loss to the Knicks, which, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's one regular season loss. But to see a player that you're asking so much from fade in that type of a way, and knowing he's done it years and years in a row, that should have you frustrated as a Sixers fan. It definitely has me frustrated. Coming up at noon, we're going to talk to Austin Krell, covers the team, covers the Sixers, and he's going to do a little bit of, hopefully, therapy for us on this whole Tobias Harris situation. But I don't know how there's denying that your faith level in Tobias should be low right now. That's just reality of where we're at. Can the Sixers withstand it? Well, we'll discuss that coming up. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about Kyle Lowry's debut. On a more positive note, he looked really good last night. And some people are, I think, taking that a smidge too far, just one game sample size from a 37-year-old player. I'll discuss what I mean coming up, and we'll continue the Tobias Harris conversation on the other side. I'm Connor Thomas, filling in for Andrew Satchunas here on 97.5 Midday. Silvana Keller on the board, and we're back after this here on 97.5 The Fanatic. Connor Thomas back live with you, filling in for Andrew Salchunas on his final day, or I guess a couple days of vacation. He'll be back on Monday. And we've been into recently the Tobias Harris performance from last night. Like, my goodness, I know that we already had an expectation of this guy's inconsistent. He hasn't stepped up in the past when he's had opportunities, but it just gets so old to me. I'm tired of it. We talked earlier about, like, how this A.J. Brown situation with the Twitter, is it his, is it not, all this drama surrounding that. Like, it doesn't outweigh how good A.J. Brown is as a player. Like, I'm not saying A.J. Brown's, I don't want him to be an Eagle. I do. But there's a point where you get tired of it, where it's just like, I just don't want to hear about this anymore. And I'm at that point with Tobias Harris' performance on the basketball court. I'm tired of the nights where you would expect a player of his caliber to step up and seize the moment. And it's just time after time again, it feels like he doesn't. And where does that leave the Sixers? Well, they're going to need him to step up if they're going to make a run at this thing. And last night's performance was not an indication that it's going to be any different than what we've seen in the past from Tobias Harris. Not that it was like a playoff game or anything, but still, it was you're coming off a week's worth of rest. You are rested. You know your team needs you. And you go out there and 7 points, handful of rebounds, a couple assists, and move on with your day. Like, that drives me insane. Again, coming up at noon, we're going to talk to Austin Krell, who covers the Sixers, and he's going to give us his perspective on the game last night, the Kyle Lowry debut, all of that stuff as far as what the team's facing, and also get into a conversation about what this team's expectation is for the postseason when we look at seeding. Because I think seeding is very important for the Philadelphia 76ers. I really do. But I don't know what the proper expectation should be for where they end up. They're falling fast in the standings, and this free fall doesn't have any signs of slowing down. Now, maybe tonight they'll get a chance to bounce back. It's going to be a tough one because they've got Cleveland in town. The Cleveland Cavaliers will come into the Wells Fargo Center. Now, if you'll remember, the Sixers, with like nobody available, beat the Cavs just before the All-Star break. I'd imagine the Cavs, being that they have been on a really good run, and maybe the All-Star break cooled them off. They lost last night. Donovan Mitchell was out with an illness, so he may not play tonight. We're not sure if he's going to be available. And it sounds like DeAnthony Melton is going to play and make his return for the Sixers. So, hey, maybe things are shifting in the Sixers' favor. But, again, like, injuries aside, who's available or who's not aside, Tobias Harris is the quality of NBA player that should step up in moments where his team really needs him. And it seems that every time he gets an opportunity to do that, he leaves a lot to be desired. And last night was another instance of just that. 610-632-0975 is the number to jump into the program. Let's go to Tasty Cake Dom on the phone lines. Hey, Dom, how you doing, man?
Great. Hey, Connor, it was great talking to you last night.
Great talking to you too, man.
Yeah. We feared this, right? We were talking last night. I feared the Knicks. I think
they're a good
they've
team.
Improved themselves more than any other team in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, listen, it's hard to have doubts about that team with what they did at the trade deadline. They got a coach that's been around forever, and I like the Knicks game and roster a lot.
Now that being said, Connor, the Sixers were right. You guys made a point earlier. The Sixers get them in the first half was really hard to watch. They appeared to be so. I mean, you can't let a team get 7 offensive rebounds in the first quarter. It's outrageous.
Right.
They get themselves right there to 6, Connor, and then on 3 consecutive possessions,
offensive rebounds
get the stop. Yeah, and Al made such a great point. Is that what's so defeating about that is you're playing defense for 23, 22 seconds, and now you got to play defense for another 6 seconds, and that's just draining on a team. So that to me, and what I wanted to ask you about, Connor, is they seem to be able to. The third quarter, I don't think the Knicks got one offensive rebound. While they were making them runs, they were stopping and they were hitting the boards, so they have the ability to do that. Like, it's a disgrace. The starting front court for the Sixers last night, the three of them, Batum, Tobias, and playoff Paul, got 11 rebounds. That's completely unacceptable. You can't have that.
No, you can't win games playing that way, Dom. You absolutely can't, and that's now I see here on the board it says Sixers look soft. Do you think it was just like a lack of effort? What do you think it is?
I think it is. With the defensive 3 seconds, you shouldn't get like they said in the first half. The Knicks doubled the Sixers in rebounding. That shouldn't be the case. You should be able to shield the team off of offensive rebounding a little bit more than they do, and I just think that's effort.
Okay.
I think that's boxing out, fundamentals. You know, the last quick point I make is I used to kill Brett Brown as a coach because offensively in half-court offense, they would get 17 turnovers in the first half. But the one thing Brett Brown did, Connor, is they were an elite rebounding team with him.
They were.
Elite. If you came in and beat the Sixers, you had to shoot 50% from the field because you weren't getting a lot of second shots.
Yeah.
They would hit the boards all night long.
The issue was a lot of teams did, and I appreciate the call, Dom. It was good to meet you last night at the John Kincaid Show happy hour there, PJ.
I knew I should have went.
You should have gone. Oh. Yeah, but no, I mean, I'm always hesitant to question a team's effort, right? Because I think more often than not, that's a misplaced type of narrative. But rebounding is one of those things where it is largely effort, right? Rebounding is wanting to rebound. Playing defense is wanting to play defense. There are some guys who are just like indefensible that are just so good at the NBA level, but the ability to play good team defense and the ability to rebound, a lot of that is just wanting to, being a willing rebounder and defender. And last night it seemed like the Sixers didn't want to be willing rebounders, especially in the biggest moments of the game. And that falls on more players than just Tobias Harris. I'm not saying, the Sixers lost because Tobias Harris stinks. Like, no. And I still think he's a quality NBA player. But you need more than just a quality NBA player. You need someone who's going to step up in the big moments of games and who's going to step up when the games get more important. And I can't have faith in Tobias Harris to do that. And last night was the final straw that made me feel that way. I want to remind you this 11 o'clock hour has been brought to you by Golden Nugget Jewelers, where Philly gets engaged. Joining us shortly, Austin Krell is going to check in, give us his thoughts on what's going on with the Sixers and what he saw last night in the game, and ask him an important question, which is why should we have faith in Tobias going forward? So we'll see what he has to say about all of that. I'm very interested, and frankly, I need to be talked off a ledge when it comes to the Philadelphia 76ers right now. I was confident in them yesterday, and after that performance last night, I know it's the Knicks, and I know it's a good team, but just the way that they lost that game, it has me shook a little bit. And I'm trying to fight that feeling, knowing that it was a game where it's a regular season game. You're playing a very good team in New York, or in Philly, obviously, but I mean New York being the good team, and I'm trying to cut them as much slack as I can. But after that performance from Tobias Harris, I'm upset. Got to be honest. So here to try and make me a little bit less upset, hopefully, we'll go to the Comcast Business Hotline now, and we'll talk to Austin Krell. You can follow him on Twitter at NBA Krell. Austin, appreciate the time, man. When you watched last night's game, talk me off the ledge with Tobias Harris.
That's not something I can do today. I apologize.
Oh, that's all right.
I mean, listen, he's the next guy up in the pecking order. He's supposed to be the second best player on the team right now, and he was not aggressive enough. He didn't call his own number enough. When he did get the ball in his hands, he was not quite strong with it. A lot of him getting stripped. I thought the play that perfectly encapsulated the whole game was they're making their run in the fourth quarter, and he cuts. Tyrese finds him with a beautiful needle thread pass, and it hits him in the hands and goes out of bounds. And that was the summation of the entire night for Tobias. He simply, he was nowhere near close to rising to the occasion.
No, and I guess my question is, should this be the point where because for me it is, we lose faith in him to do this at any point this season? Or was this just a, man, he didn't do it against the Knicks last night, but we should still believe in him to be a part of this team positively the rest of the season?
I think he's certainly somebody who can, give you 20, 22 a night with relative ease and some level of confidence. I mean, the games where he doesn't, when he's the third or fourth pecking order, it's explainable as he just isn't getting enough touches.
Right.
But in this environment where Joel is out, he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot more. He should be able to sustain, 16 or 22 a night without much issue. The problem isn't that he can't do that. The problem is there's no pattern of consistency that they can demonstrate that you would say this is the exact type of moment and type of game where Tobias, we can count on him to step up and supply that amount of offensive action.
So I'll ask you this on top of that then, because here's my worry, that the Sixers are fading in the standings and that the play-in tournament is becoming more of a possibility with each passing game. When you look at seeding for the Sixers, do you think they're at risk of being a play-in team?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, they have Cleveland tonight. They have Milwaukee Sunday afternoon. They have Boston on Tuesday. They still haven't played the Clippers yet. There's a very real chance that they're in the play-in tournament. I also think they're a team that, with the head coach that they have, with the roster that they have around Joel Embiid, if Joel can get healthy and get on the court and ramp up in time for the playoffs, they're the wild card team in the Eastern Conference that nobody is going to want to play. I don't think Boston necessarily fears them, but I mean, I don't think they're an opponent that you want to see in the first round ever.
Yeah, I guess my worry with that is just that with Joel Embiid's health or lack thereof, he's had trouble even in postseasons where he's gone in healthy. So if you're going to have a harder path where you have to play extra games, that's going to make it more difficult, even if they're a feared team, for them to get out of the second round, much less win the conference and go to the finals, right? Are you with me on that one?
I would say this. There's a chance that their side of the bracket is Cleveland in the first round or something like that, and then Milwaukee in the second round. Or if Milwaukee continues to fumble, it could be a Cleveland Knicks first, second round. If Joel is healthy and good to go, I think they might even be a favorite to get to the conference finals if that's the side of the bracket they're on.
Wow. Listen, I'll take that. Needed some positivity today, so we're going to hang on to that one. Speaking of positivity, Kyle Lowry last night, a really strong debut in his homecoming. What did you see from the 37-year-old, 18-year NBA vet, and what was the most impressive thing about that performance?
I thought the most impressive thing was that he took an elbow to the face, had a facial laceration, got stitches, got a Band-Aid, missed the rest of the first half when they got blown out of the water, and came back willingly in the second half. And then in the first play of that he was back in the game, tries to take a charge on Jalen Brunson. That's gritty. That's admirable effort that tells you the type of mentality that Kyle Lowry comes in with. I mean, that's not something that I think a lot of guys would do. We'll come back to the game, let alone slide in so intuitively and take a charge. As much as people enjoyed and like Patrick Beverley, I think some of the biggest things that Kyle Lowry does that Beverley didn't do as well, and he demonstrated last night, was number one, he's a quick trigger from three, not afraid to shoot it from three. And number two, he's just a very intuitive ball handler. And and the guy who commits to something on offense. If they swing the ball his way in the corner, he's pump faking, attacking a closeout, and getting to the basket, or he's drawing the help and making a swing other side of the court. Those are just connective tissue plays that are so incredibly important in the era of three-point shooting, because you're cracking the interior, drawing help, and then kicking to an open shooter. That was how the Knicks blew them out of the water in the first half. It's that exact type of play. And also, you look at some of the passes he makes, and you just see this guy is a veteran point guard who has seen everything and knows all the tricks in the book, right? In the first half, I think it was the first couple minutes he was in the game, ball comes off the glass, he gets the rebound without even looking or seeing, just flings it up the court, for a Hail Mary. I'm not even sure he knew if any of his teammates were back. He just assumed, hey, if someone is running, and I make this pass, it's going to be a touchdown pretty easily. That's not a pass that a lot of other guys on this team are making. So those are the little things that he does so well. And on top of like the versatile scoring that he showed last night, that like if you're someone who appreciates Batum and the little things that he does to make the engine go, you're going to appreciate Kyle Lowry for sure.
Well, we definitely did last night, and you're absolutely right about that toughness and just that knack for kind of making the right plays. We're talking with Austin Krell. You can follow him on Twitter at NBA Krell, covers the Sixers. And Austin, that made me think about the acquisitions at the trade deadline. And I know people have seen a couple games of Buddy Hield and of Cameron Payne, and now you've seen one of Kyle Lowry. But something I was talking about just before we had you on was whether or not you feel like Tobias Harris should have been shopped more, or the Sixers should have made more of an effort to move him at the trade deadline. Can you just talk a little bit about what you know about that process ahead of the deadline and what the Sixers handled?
Well, I do think that they tried very hard to get a backup big, as has been reported. I can't speak to the exactly how the Buddy Hield talks had progressed, because as far as I was told, or as far as I knew, there was a ways to go in contract or in trade talks for Buddy Hield the night before, and then they got it done. As far as Tobias goes, I mean, listen, that organization will tell you, like, it's obviously not an easy contract with given the level of production on the court. However, there's a lot of intangible value off the court. And, the things that he does to sort of keep the group together behind closed doors and sort of, make sure that the younger guys are doing what they're supposed to do. And those aren't the things that really resonate with fans, because it's about what you do on the court. Yeah. But in terms of building a team, building up young players, those things are immensely important. If they did have conversations about Tobias Harris being moved at the deadline, I am not privy to them.
Okay, fair enough. Last one for you before we let you go. So Kate Scott, of course, who announces on the TV broadcast for the team, does a wonderful job. She joined an earlier show on the station, and she talked about Kyle Lowry potentially cracking the starting lineup at some point. When you watch him play, do you see him at 37 years of age being a player that could start for this team at some point this year?
So I do. A lot of it is dependent upon, how healthy is DeAnthony Melton. And what the offense, how the advanced numbers sort of portray them on offense. Last night I thought there was a lot of already built chemistry, in there. Kyle is screening for Tyrese, and those are always actions that I love to see, because I want versatile offensive players screening for other versatile offensive players, because it makes the defense have to think, and that was something that Lowry did very intuitively. I also think that with the actions they've run with Buddy Hield, it might make more sense to move him to the 3 for some lineups, because that way you're just pushing it farther down the defensive spectrum, and they are having to make more difficult decisions when they're guarding those actions. And so I think if you're moving Buddy to the 3, you probably want to go a little bit smaller at 2, maybe, and maybe that's Melton, but maybe that's also Lowry in some lineups. It's going to be situational. If it's a very good ball pressure team on the perimeter, might make more sense to start Kyle Lowry over Melton, say, because Melton is not exactly the most crisp ball handler. Lowry is a better ball handler, and you might want to get Tyrese some off-the-ball reps just to let him sort of manage his own energy level in the game. So I could totally see it.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate the time as always, and it's good to end with something a little bit more positive than the Tobias talk. But another game tonight, man, so get ready for it, and hopefully the Sixers can pull off a win against the Cavs.
No problem. Thanks, Connor.
Thanks, Austin. Austin Krell there joining us. You can follow him on Twitter at NBA Krell. Got a lot of good information on the Sixers, covers the team, so he'll have a lot of your breaking news and everything on there. So appreciate him taking the time to join us. And I'll tell you what, I'm surprised that there's as many people out there. Austin Krell just said it. Kate Scott said it earlier this morning. We've heard from multiple people that know basketball. Kyle Lowry is a potential starter on this team. When I hear that, I'm like, dude, the guy is ancient. I love the toughness. I think he's a valuable player, but I don't think he has starter minutes left in him at this point in his career. And yet it seems to be something that people are thinking about. And that's a strong argument that we just heard about, well, if they move Buddy Hield to the 3, that means that you need to have a number 3 guard on the other team, like a guard, not a guard player, but a small forward on the other team has to defend him. And Buddy Hield stretches the floor. So that stretches the defense more. And then you have a bit of a wider set for if and when Joel Embiid comes back. Maybe Lowry fits into that better. I won't be mad if Kyle Lowry starts. Like, I'm not like, oh, this guy stinks. He can't play. He shouldn't be starting. My point more is I never really considered the possibility that when Kyle Lowry was signed on the veteran buyout market, that he could potentially be a starter for this team at some point. So that'll be something interesting to keep an eye on as the season continues. But some great stuff from Austin Krell. And the one thing I don't love, because I'm pretty resigned to my thoughts on Tobias Harris. Like, I have a feeling that we're all more right than wrong when we question his ability to be an impact player for this team in the role he's in. I don't feel confident in saying that the Sixers are going to be a play-in team. I still feel like they have a really good shot to get a seed above what would put him in the play-in tournament. But Austin was saying there that play-in tournament is a realistic potential option for the Philadelphia 76ers, and they don't have that easy of a schedule rounding things out. So they need to start winning some basketball games here so you don't have a couple extra games that you have to play. And with Joel Embiid potentially coming back, any extra game is a dangerous, dangerous prospect. So some fun Sixers talk there. We'll continue a little bit of that on the other side as well, just wrapping up my thoughts on what Austin had to say in that Tobias Harris conversation from earlier. But something else I want to get into, just dive a little bit into, because the Phillies are going to play their first spring training game tomorrow. And we had nothing less than a shouting match between, I think, like 7 or 8 people this morning when I walked into the Fanatic hallways. We were back there, and I'll tell you more about how that happened. But it was over the Philadelphia Phillies lineup and some managerial tendencies. And I could tell that there's passion about this subject. So I want to ask you something about Rob Thompson and how he's going to handle the Phillies this year as the manager in his second full season, third year as the Phillies manager, and where you're at faith-wise with him. So we'll discuss that coming up. I'm Connor Thomas, filling in for Andrew Salchunas here on 97.5 Midday. Silvana Kelleher on the board, and we're back after this here on 97.5 The Fanatic. Altunis, I got to give a shout out to Ricky Bo. I got to. Also, Tyrone Johnson. I'll tell you why in a second. But Ricky Bo brought in some pretzels today for us, so I appreciate that from him. You got here Tyrone and Ricky and Jen on the best show ever. Also, we got in a little pretzel fight because Silvana likes the worst pretzels in the history of existence.
Gosh.
She gets the old, like the bag of just the plain pretzels.
I have very limited options in that vending machine.
Okay, well,
They're just pretzels.
then you should come up with something to bring from home that actually has flavor and quality to it.
I did bring it from home. I just already ate it. I didn't anticipate being this hungry.
Okay, well, I imagine there's got to be a better option than just the plain pretzel. But
No.
that's beside the point. That and Dylan agrees with you. So there's multiple people here who just enjoy the plain, and I'm not talking the soft pretzel, the plain hard pretzel. So, my goodness.
Old time pretzels is what they're called.
We need to work on your palate. But we also need to work on what the Philadelphia 76ers are doing. And Tobias Harris had himself a very underwhelming performance last night. And unfortunately, that's become a trend for him in his time with the Philadelphia 76ers. He was brought here as a fringe all-star player from the Los Angeles Clippers. And when he was acquired, it was one of the first big moves to, like, put another star player around Joel Embiid. And for that, I think that he served his purpose early on. Like, I think he met the expectations early on when he arrived in Philadelphia. But as he stayed here over the years and other star players came in and left and there was roster turnover, he was the consistent, person alongside Joel Embiid. You'd have Butler one year. You'd have Ben Simmons for a couple years. You have, Al Horford and Josh Richardson one year. But, ultimately, Tobias Harris was the mainstay. And the Sixers felt it right to give him a major contract. That's on the Sixers. That's not on Tobias. But once you pay him that money, you have to understand that the expectation of the fan base is going to change as to what that player has to do. And rather than be just someone who existed in Joel Embiid's universe, Tobias Harris then became this dude has been injury prone at points, Joel Embiid. When he gets hurt, when he is unavailable, when we rest him, because remember, this was prior to the load management rules that the NBA has instituted today. When we rest Joel Embiid, we're paying you to be the guy, not a guy, the guy. You have to be a quality all-star level player when Joel Embiid is not out there because he is sometimes unavailable, and we cannot take a huge step back in our ability to compete. And from the moment that happened, it seems that Tobias Harris has gotten opportunities, and he is just underwhelmed. And that's it. It's not that he stinks. He's a good basketball player. He really is. But he's not one that seems to rise to occasions. We talked earlier. There are players in NBA history, there are players in the NBA right now that rise to occasions. I'll give you one. I don't like this player at all. I really don't. Trae Young, I think when you look at his numbers, is a guy that he can be a stat padder at times. I think his game is listen, did he deserve to be an all-star this year? The stats would tell you yes. He made it in as an alternate. I get it. I don't think his stats are indicative of what his game truly is, but that's neither here nor there. My point is that when you get Trae Young into a big game, that guy plays bigger than what you'd expect him to. We saw it in a postseason series against the Philadelphia 76ers. His ability to penetrate, his ability to shoot the basketball, he was a problem for the Sixers in that series. I think part of the problem was also Doc Rivers not adjusting fast enough to what the Hawks were doing. But, again, another problem for another day. My point is there are players out there that exist that when they get put in moments that are big moments, the spotlight is on them individually for whatever reason, they rise to the occasion. And I think last night was the final straw that tells me Tobias Harris is not going to be that type of player. We've already seen it for years, so maybe I should have came to that full conclusion sooner. I was already a little bit worried about his ability to hold up the team while Joel Embiid is out. I did not have faith in it. But I lost what little faith could have potentially been salvaged last night. That's just where I'm at with him. Where are you on Tobias Harris? 610-632-0975 is the number to jump into the program. We're going to talk about the Philadelphia Phillies in just a second, but I want to talk to Warren in Wilmington next. Warren, you're live here on 97.5 The Fanatic. Warren, you there?
Hello.
Yes, you're on the air, Warren.
Hi, how you doing?
Doing good. How about yourself?
Not bad, thank you. I want to speak about Tobias also. First thing I want to say is that I'm originally from Suffolk County, as is Tobias. And I have a first cousin who knows Tobias and his father personally, as he used to play Division I ball. And Tobias got into basketball because his father played ball. And I might say that everybody's happy that his father negotiated a contract for him, but he ain't living up to expectations. According to my cousin, he says that Tobias has to be pushed. That's his personality. And even his father says so. So the point is that the coach needs to assign an assistant coach on a regular basis, prior to the game, to insist that he do what he's supposed to do, that he's got the talent, and that when he gets the ball, it ain't a matter of, thinking who he's going to pass to, but go on ahead and do his thing because he's got the ability. He just has to be pushed because his personality is not to go after it on his own.
Right.
You don't want to feel like he's, doing things that the other players are going to get upset about. He's just got to be pushed.
I understand what you're saying, Warren, and thank you for the call, and I appreciate a little bit of insight there from the people that know Tobias. Here's what I'll say. That may very well be true. It's unacceptable. Like, if you are an NBA player on a max contract and you need a specific coach to push you hard to achieve the level that you need to be at, that is not acceptable.
How old is he? 31?
Something like that. I don't know.
That makes it even more unacceptable.
Like,
come on.
He is just, you are supposed to be internally motivated. Yeah, 31 years of age. You're supposed to be a guy that goes out and takes, you've earned this money playing NBA basketball. Do you think that, and these are going to be top-level examples, but you think LeBron's got to be pushed? Do you think Kobe had to be pushed? Do you think, AI had to be pushed? Do you think that Michael Jordan had to be pushed to be as great as they are? At some points, everybody has someone pushing them in the right direction. But the players who become great NBA players go get it on their own. They go take what they deserve. They don't need a coach to tell them, hey, you got to try harder. I don't care about personality. I told you about Joel Embiid. Off the court, Joel Embiid is not a fiery personality. He is an easygoing guy. But when he gets on the basketball court, when he gets in the crucible of competition, that guy wants it bad. Tobias Harris has got to want it. Now, I'm not saying that he doesn't, but he's got to prove that he does. He's got to go out there and play with more fire, attack the game rather than letting it come to you. You don't have that luxury anymore. As the fourth option on the team, you might. When Joel Embiid is out, when you're missing multiple starters with DeAnthony Melton not playing, you need to be a guy who initiates, not someone who reacts. So what Warren was saying, our last caller there, might be right, that he needs someone to push him. But if that's the case, that's an unacceptable excuse for why he has not been playing up to the potential of the contract he paid. That's just it. I mean, I can't accept that as this is the only issue. That's a major issue. And that's one that you can fix internally. And that gives me shades of Ben Simmons and Markelle Fultz and guys that have been here before, to some extent, James Harden. I know James Harden has pushed in the past. He's an all-time great player. But here there were points, I'm tired of this guy needs this to be successful. This guy needs that to be successful. I want players in this city who want to go out and earn it because they want to win. Not because someone told them to do it, not because there was a coach that motivated them to do it, because they want to be winners. And I don't think that is too much to ask for NBA or professional athletes in general. And if you got to ask Tobias Harris for that, I mean, that just further pushes me to this isn't it for the Philadelphia 76ers. But again, take that all with a grain of salt because I appreciate Warren filling us in. It's like a second-hand, third-hand account of something. So I don't know that that's fact. I'm just saying that would be an unacceptable excuse if that was indeed the case. By the way, the 12 o'clock hour here is brought to you by Service First Heating and Air Conditioning. You can get 0% financing for 72 months and a $500 rebate when you purchase a complete heating and cooling system from Service First. Learn more at servicefirsthvac.com. All right, I want to get to something, well, maybe it'll be a little more positive. I don't know, but I walk in this morning to sit down at the prep computers to plan out what we're going to talk about today. And the first couple minutes were fine. It was calm. And everyone was like kind of quiet back there. And I was typing away. And then the folks on the Jockey Cage show, John, Bob, Pat, love those guys. They come out and they were talking about some stuff with the Philadelphia Phillies and the lineup and what they're looking for there. And of course, then we get into the debate about Kyle Schwarber batting leadoff. Should he? Should it be somebody else? And the next thing I know, there are like 6 or 7 people yelling over each other about who's got better on base percentage and who's your best hitter and who should be batting where and who should be batting here. And I didn't expect it to get that heated. I mean, my goodness, folks, the Phillies haven't even played a spring training game yet. We don't know who's going to be on the roster in some spots. I mean, we have a good idea, but there are some open spots still on the 26-man opening day roster, and we're already yelling about why the manager won't change the lineup. Like, let's at least get closer to the regular season. But it makes me realize something, that there is a lot of passion out there and a lot of dissenting opinions when it comes to Rob Thompson's handling of the lineup and Rob Thompson's handling of the Philadelphia Phillies in general. Like, there are a lot of people critical of what a guy who, mind you, went to the World Series as an interim manager, led this team to that World Series, and then in his first full year back, went to the NLCS. Did he win a ring? No. And that's something that he's going to look to reach that pinnacle this year. And I'm not saying like Rob Thompson's the perfect manager, but the resume's pretty darn good for his first year and a half as the Philadelphia Phillies manager. I would take that if you had told me that when he was hired after Joe Girardi was let go. So keep that in mind, that it seems like Rob Thompson knows a little bit about what he's doing. But my question to you is this. I want to open this up to a full conversation that gives you free reign to voice your concerns about Rob Thompson. Because the Kyle Schwarber leadoff thing, frankly, one, I think it's just one piece of a much larger puzzle. And two, I don't think it's changing.
I agree.
We can have that debate, but I don't think that they're changing that this year. But I want to know, like, when you look at the way that Rob Thompson has managed this baseball team since taking over for Joe Girardi in June of 2022, what do you look at that you would potentially change? What is something about Rob Thompson's decision-making or the actual decisions themselves that you would change? If you could only change one, I'd love to hear your thoughts at 610-632-0975. Maybe you wouldn't change anything. Maybe you just say, nah, to me, he's been a really good manager, and I'm not going to mess with how he does the lineup or what he does with the bullpen or how he decides who's playing on what days. I'm totally comfortable with Rob Thompson as is. Now, I'm a person who always likes to improve upon things. It's very rare that I look at something and I say, that right there, that's perfect. You can't do any better than that. I'll acknowledge greatness, but perfection is a near impossibility in sports. So, are there things that I would choose for Rob Thompson to do differently? Absolutely. I'm going to acknowledge first, like I did, the guy's a really great manager. He absolutely is. But I'm going to also tell you that I don't love the way he handles the bullpen. I don't. I haven't since he's taken over. Part of it is that I'm a person who likes set roles for the Philadelphia Phillies relievers and relievers in general. I think it's easier to pitch in circumstances where you know I am the closer. I am throwing the ninth inning. If we are in a 1, 2, or 3-run game, I am going to be out there on the mound when the game is ending. I am the setup man. I have the 8th inning for the closing roles. I am the lefty specialist. I know generally when I'm going to be in the game. Like, I think that is more conducive to success. Personal opinion. But that's how I would prefer the bullpen to be run. And that's not how Rob Thompson does things. It's not how the Phillies do things. And it's not how modern baseball does things. So maybe this is the kind of transition period for me where I'm starting to become the old man stuck in the past of how it was when I grew up. But I'm going to stick to my guns until someone proves me otherwise, that there's a better way to do things. And I don't know that the way Rob Thompson handles the bullpen is the best. I think he's had questionable decision-making, too. Like, that goes into the same category as when he's pulling starting pitchers. Let's not forget, I hate to bring up memories from the past, especially bad ones, but the decision to pull Zach Wheeler in the World Series in 2022, the final game of the year, and then Alvarado comes in and gives up the Yordan Alvarez home run. Like, there are a lot of people who, it wasn't hindsight, we were saying at the time, why in the world are you pulling Wheeler? And we watched that play out. So I do think that some of the decisions Rob Thompson makes when it comes to the bullpen are very questionable. But I like the lineup, and I don't mind him getting guys extra rest, because when you get to the postseason, who's been healthier, the Philadelphia Phillies or the Atlanta Braves? Because it's been the Phillies both times, and you see how that plays out when you get into the postseason. They've had really good health. They've been rested. They've balanced that really, really well as an organization. I think credit for that goes to the manager for getting guys days off when he can. So I look at that and I say, okay, I'm comfortable with where the lineup is. I'll let him have that. I'm comfortable with the way he handles who's in the lineup every day and when players get rest. The one thing I would change is the way he handles the bullpen. But I know that people out there are just trying to have this Kyle Schwarber leadoff debate over and over and over again. And, folks, I get it. I understand. He doesn't look like a leadoff hitter. Trey Turner is like a prototypical leadoff hitter. And on top of that, Bryson Stott is a prototypical leadoff hitter. If one of those guys bats leadoff for this team in the future, I would not be remotely surprised, especially considering they'll both very likely outlast Kyle Schwarber's time here in Philadelphia. But this year, it's going to be Schwarber again. And they shouldn't change it. Like, they just shouldn't. If that's your pick, like, feel free to make the argument. I've heard many before, and none of them have ever landed as much as I can say this. When Kyle Schwarber bats leadoff, the Philadelphia Phillies win more. When Kyle Schwarber doesn't bat leadoff, the Philadelphia Phillies win less. Is that a trend that's going to happen forever? No, not necessarily. That's a trend over 2 years. So that's not like a law of physics where Sir Isaac Newton developed actually 4 principles, and the 4th law was Kyle Schwarber has to bat leadoff if the Phillies are going to win. Like, no, that can change, but nothing has happened to indicate that it will to this point. So this is an old saying. You may have heard it before. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And there are a lot of people looking at the Philadelphia Phillies lineup and Kyle Schwarber at the top of it and trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist. He's just like, him batting leadoff is not a problem for this team. They won 87 games in 2022. They won 90 games in 2023. They made the NL Championship Series in both years. They knocked out their division champion in both years. They should have gone to the World Series last year, but listen, a lot of people went cold. You know who wasn't at fault for that? Kyle Schwarber batting leadoff. Like, that was not the reason the Phillies did not recognize their potential, and it hasn't been at any point. He is a valuable player to have in that spot. He gets on base. That is why he's going to continue to be the leadoff hitter. If you have an argument, like, just, I don't know what argument you can make to me to have me change my opinion, but you're more than welcome to try it. Like, I'll hear you out. I'm not just going to be like, no chance, hang up. No, I'd love to hear your argument in favor of someone else batting leadoff, and I'll concede this. Trey Turner's numbers over his career would indicate he is like the perfect leadoff hitter. Bryson Stott's numbers, in a small sample size, but in his first couple years in the majors, would indicate he could be a darn good leadoff hitter. But don't make the change for change's sake. Why do you think the Phillies just, for lack of a better term, ran it back this year. Brought back a lot of the same guys, didn't make a lot of alterations to the roster because they clearly believe that consistency is a benefit. And they think they have a good enough team. So if they're going to use consistency in building the roster, guess who's going to use consistency in building the lineup? Rob Thompson and the Philadelphia Phillies. So if you're expecting Kyle Schwarber to not bat leadoff this year, I think I got bad news for you. It's probably going to be the big guy as the first batter of the year for the Philadelphia Phillies and for a lot of games unless something significantly changes. 610-632-0975 is the phone number to jump in. It's not just the lineup conversation. Of course, you can chime in on that if you'd like to. But is there anything that you would change about how Rob Thompson has managed the Phillies the past 2 years? Is there a part of his managerial ability that you wish he would alter or improve? I'm very interested to hear what people have to say about that. We have also been having a conversation about Tobias Harris's lackluster performance last night, and you can continue to jump in on that. See, it's already happened. I'm looking at the YouTube chat. This just popped up. Neil Dever just wrote, or Deaver, however you say, Deaver, just said batting Schwarber leadoff does not optimize the line. I don't care about lineup optimization. I care about winning baseball games. Do you win more when Kyle Schwarber bats leadoff? Yes. That's just what it comes to. People get all caught up in the fancy numbers and what a leadoff hitter is supposed to be. I care about how many games this team is going to win. And I care about the success they've had with Kyle Schwarber as the leadoff hitter. And they have been successful, more successful than any team in the National League the last 2 years with Kyle Schwarber as the leadoff hitter. So that solves it for me. Maybe it doesn't for you. And again, the phone number, 610-632-0975. It's right there for you. I would love to have the conversation with you. On the other side, we're going to reset everything we've been getting into, including where we started the show, which was a conversation about Nick Sirianni's leash that he deserves as the head coach this year of the Philadelphia Eagles. How much does he get from the organization as far as leeway before they say, yeah, your time's up? Where is that line for you as a fan of the team? We'll get into that even more on the other side. I'm Connor Thomas, filling in for Andrew Saptunas here on 97.5 Middays. Silvana Keller on the board. And we're back after this here on 97.5 The Fanatic. Connor Thomas back live with you here, filling in for Andrew Salchunas on 97.5 Middays. Andrew will be back on Monday. We've run the gamut pretty much today. We started discussing the Philadelphia Eagles and whether or not you have like a long leash, I guess is the way to put it, for Nick Sirianni this year. I guess it's to break down the question, how long would you give him this season before you consider we might need to make a change? If things don't go well, and what is your bar for things not going well? I think it's incredibly high because think about what was unacceptable this year. The guy went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and he went to the playoffs this year after a 10-1 start to the season. I know they collapsed, right? But if you just look at it he's made the playoffs 3 years in a row, and he was on the hot seat, that already shows you how high the bar is here in Philadelphia, and rightfully so. I think that's understandable considering what this team could achieve if they're put in the right position. But that means this coming season, if they're a first-round exit in the postseason, that's probably not good enough to save his job. Like, if they don't make the playoffs, see ya. If they're in the second round of the NFC postseason, like, he could still be gone. Like, that's a tough thing. The bar is so high considering the Eagles' talent level and what the expectation is in the city that I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen when it comes to how Nick Sirianni can overcome the hot seat he's on. So that's kind of where we got into it, where we started the program. We're going to discuss some NFL stuff as well because we have some interesting news that just came out dealing with the NFL. But we were also having a conversation about Tobias Harris's performance, or lack thereof, last night with only 7 points in the loss to the Knicks, and why that was kind of the final straw for me. I never really was sitting there at any point. I haven't been sitting here at any point this season saying, I think this is the year that Tobias Harris wins me over. He did have a really nice start to the season. I thought we might be getting like contract year Tobias. But I never had faith in him to be more than what he's been for the Philadelphia 76ers, which is a nice player that when given the opportunity to rise to the occasion, often falls short. Last night was another one of those, and it was a really painful performance. And that was my breaking point with Tobias last night. This is where I accept as we head into the final 2 months of the regular season, and then he is no longer under contract at the end of the year. I'm willing to say that it's very likely that this is just the player he is his entire time in Philadelphia, and that is a problem for the Sixers going forward, especially being that they don't have Joel Embiid available, and he was supposed to be the guy to step up. 610-632-0975 is the number to jump into the program. Now, this is some breaking NFL news. It's not Eagles specific, but it's important for what the Eagles may do. Yeah, you can hit it, Sil. So
I was eyeing you up.
Yeah, the NFL. That's going to be on out of context.
Oh, my gosh.
The NFL informed teams today. This is for Ari Myraz, for Ian Rappaport, all of the NFL reporters have. But the NFL informed teams today that the 2024 salary cap will be $255.4 million. Now, that number in and of itself might not mean anything to you, but it's a huge increase based on what it was last year. That's a $30.6 million increase from last season. And the projected cap was less than that. I believe it was right around $242 million was the projected. So it looks to be about an extra $13 million that will be available to teams in salary cap this year for the NFL. That's big news for a couple types of teams. One, that's big news for any team that needs to be rebuilding their roster aggressively. So, for example, like I'm just totally making this up, but if there was a team out there that already had the quarterback they believed in and already had a lot of talent in the roster and already believed that that talent could take them close to winning a Super Bowl, but they had, say, I don't know, the defensive side of the ball was a complete dumpster fire at points, and they need to rebuild aggressively the defensive side of the ball. That extra cap money could be very beneficial to doing that. If that reminds you of any teams out there, I'm trying to place one. I feel like it sounds like an NFC East team. Oh, yeah, the Eagles are in that situation. Now, I was just out there and talking with Ty and Ricky and Jen, and Tyrone brought up a great point about how the percentage of the salary cap is going to affect contracts being offered too. It's not just, well, you have more money and you just pay players based on the old salary cap. Like, the players have this information too. So if you're smart and you're negotiating a contract this year, you're going to say, I know you just got more money from the salary cap, so I'd expect my cut of the increase. So it's not a 100% like, oh, you have all this extra money. But it is good that it came in above the projected number, because the more cap space you have available, the better it is for teams that are aggressively retooling. And that means that the Philadelphia Eagles can now commit more money to players in free agency that you'd be looking at to retool the defense or maybe tweak a couple things on the offensive side of the ball. So that's good news, right? If the Philadelphia Eagles were like, we already have all of our players locked up and signed the long-term contracts of players that you need, you probably want a minimal increase in cap so that other teams can't catch up to you. But being that the Eagles are in a spot where they need to change this roster, maybe not significantly, but at least significantly on the defensive side of the ball, that is really good news. And you know who is just absolutely licking his chops right now is Howie Roseman, who is already a salary cap wizard, who now sees, oh, I got $13 million on top of the projection to work with. Big increase in cap, $30 million increase in cap compared to what I had last year. Let's go to work. Do you know what I can do with $30 million? Hopefully Howie's about to show us. So that's good news for the Eagles. And it's good news for a lot of teams around the NFL, but it'll make this offseason even more interesting. Not just that the cap went up. It goes up every year. The only year that I think it went down was like the 2020 COVID year. And I think even that one, it stayed the same maybe, or it might have been a slight decrease. That was under strange circumstances. But this year, another increase in the cap and a much larger one than expected. So if you were looking for big moves in free agency from the Philadelphia Eagles, that is absolutely great news for the prospect of rebuilding this defense. Doesn't mean that they're guaranteed to do the job correctly, but it means that they have more of an opportunity today than they thought they had yesterday. So that's good. A little bit of good news to help put the Eagles in a more positive light in a week that has been not so positive for the Philadelphia Eagles, even though it's been months since they played a football game. So what should the Philadelphia Eagles do with the salary cap? What should you spend your money on? I think you got to look defensively. But remember, we talked about this before, too. Just a letter of caution. The franchise tag period is still ongoing. That goes until March 5th, I believe, would be the final day to franchise tag a player. So you have to wait because there might be guys out there that you're like, wow, he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. Let's go ahead and grab him, have him be a Philadelphia Eagle. You got to wait until they're franchise tagged or not, until you know who's going to be available truly on the market. So people are going to stand pat for a little bit. It's just a precursor for free agency that shows a good sign for teams that need to rebuild. And the Eagles are one of those teams. 610-632-0975 is the number to jump into the program. So I just kind of reset what we were getting into there, and I know we've had a couple people waiting who want to get into some stuff as far as the topics. So let's go to Calvin in Philadelphia who wants to talk a little Tobias Harris. Calvin, you're live here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Hello.
What's up, man?
Yeah, I just want to talk about Tobias. I agree Tobias could be inconsistent, but one thing I look at, he is coming back from a sickness. I believe he missed 5 games leading up to last night's game. And I think he's like a scapegoat, a lot of times. I think if you take away the amount of money he makes, if he was making $15 to $20 million, I think people will look at him differently.
Right, but Calvin, you understand we can't do that.
I understand that. But he's really a fourth option. And if you go around the league, I believe he's better than most fourth options around the league. I think he's comparable to like an Andrew Wiggins. And he's a solid defender. average to above average rebounder. I think if you just look at it as a whole, I think he's a solid player. I just think the money is the first thing people say, understandably. But,
Yeah.
Just take a look around the league. He's a solid fourth option.
Calvin, we're on the same page, right? But here's what I'll tell you. So, Tobias Harris, there's no way he was going to turn down that contract, right? Like, we wouldn't expect him to not take the most money possible. That'd be stupid. So, he took the money, and part of that is you're going to have to deal with the expectations of what that contract brings you. I agree with you that he's like a fourth option. The second you choose to sign that contract, you say, okay, this money is worth the expectation. So that's why I don't think he's being scapegoated. I think he's being overpaid, and part of the paycheck is he's going to have to deal with people always looking at that salary and expecting more.
Yeah, right. I can't agree with that, but I just think he's. I just think that. I just think that people is too hard on him. I guess scapegoat may not be the right word to use.
I get what you're saying, though. I think we're on the same page. And Calvin, man, I appreciate the call. Thank you for checking in. Yes, are we probably expecting too much from Tobias Harris for what he can be as a player? That's certainly possible, right? I think the guy has a high ceiling when he has those really good games, but he doesn't have the ceiling of a max contract player. The Sixers thought he did at the time. They were proven incorrect. So is it unfair to expect Tobias Harris to be better than what he can be? In a way, yes. But part of signing that contract is you saying, I have faith in myself to be that player. I wouldn't expect him to turn it down, but here's the thing, right? Here's how I think about contracts in professional sports. Part of that money is to play the game. Part of that money is to deal with what A.J. Brown or whoever runs A.J. Brown's Twitter account at the given moment has been complaining about, which is to deal with the media and the scrutiny of the fans and everything like that. And part of that money is to deal with the expectations that come with making it. Like, if you told me you're going to do a radio show and every person who tells you anything about your radio show is like, oh, you stink, I hate it, you're terrible, like all this. Like, I only get negative comments. But then you told me you're going to pay me $50 million to do it. Like, okay, is it unfair that I'm getting that scrutiny and everyone hates it? Maybe, but you're paying me to deal with that. Like, part of Tobias's contract is paying him to deal with the expectations. So I don't think Tobias is being scapegoated. I think he's being overpaid. I think the fan base rightfully is trying to urge him to reach the potential of a player worth that contract. And I think over and over again, he's proving he's not capable of doing that. And we don't have to hate the guy for it. He's not a bad person because of it. And he shouldn't have turned down the money like he didn't deserve to get paid. Like, he was going to take that contract because anyone who is offered that amount of money should take it. I root for everybody to make that type of money, and many of us never will. But what I'm saying is that the reality is he's making that type of money. He has not achieved up to that contract. And when we watch him play, you look at it and say, okay, the Sixers are being hampered because he has not played up to that deal. So that's why I don't think it's unfair or scapegoating him or anything to criticize Tobias Harris to the level of what his contract suggests he should be. And if he's not that player, well, the contract's almost up. We'll find out with the next contract he gets. But it ain't going to be a max deal. I'll tell you that. 610-632-0975 is the phone number to jump into the program. Let's go to Brent in media next. Brent, you're live here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
What's up?
How you doing, man?
I'm doing okay. I want to talk about the prospect of maybe bringing Tobias Harris off the bench for the foreseeable future. Like last night's game, he was to the point where he was hurting the team the way he was playing.
Right.
And like a guy like Ricky Council or like Kelly Oubre starting over him could have helped the Sixers win that game last night. Actually, I like the three guards. I know DeAnthony Melton's coming back. I like the potential of maybe starting three guards like Kyle Lowry, Maxey Melton, or like Kyle Lowry, Maxey, Buddy Hield. So, like, what's your thoughts on that?
So we had Austin Krell on earlier, who covers the team, and he brought up potentially starting Lowry alongside Maxey and Buddy Hield moves to the 3. So I know there's a thought process about that. I've got to see more of what Kyle Lowry can bring you. He's 37 years old. He's been in the league 18 years. He is just a guy that I don't see being a starter consistently for this team. So we got to see a couple more games before we say Kyle Lowry can start. But here's my question to you, Brent, about Tobias coming off the bench. Like, how does that help the team? Like, who are you replacing him with that is better?
Well, I think it would just help the team more if Tobias Harris, like, runs the bench unit because he's, like, one of those players that can take the ball and score at times. Like, he is a talented player. But I think that in the flow of the offense, he really just slows the game down. Like, Maxey's a fast-paced player. Kelly Oubre from time to time is a fast-paced player. So, like, I think that he's better suited in a bench unit for the team as a whole. Like, and I know DeAnthony Melton's coming back, so we don't really actually have to start Kyle Lowry. Can do a Maxey Melton Hield as a 1-2-3.
Absolutely, you could do that. And, Brent, I appreciate the call, man. Like, there's a lot of things that Nick Nurse can change around with this lineup and probably will have to try to do as he figures out where the new guys fit in. Like, Buddy Hield and Cameron Payne have played a couple games, but they have been games where other players have been injured. So Nick Nurse is really still getting a feel for how these guys fit into his rotations and the lineups and everything still now. So you're going to have to give Nick Nurse some time until he figures out what he wants to do. I imagine there will be some tinkering with the rotations, if not the starting lineup altogether. But my thing with, like, the Tobias Harris bench stuff, Doc Rivers did try that, right? And we've seen Tobias with the bench unit before. It doesn't make him a different player. And I don't think it makes the Sixers better. It just makes them different. But you don't have someone that is better than Tobias Harris to take his spot. I still think he's a good basketball player. Like, I do. Tobias Harris is a starting basketball player on a contending team. The issue is you're paying him like a guy that's supposed to be the best player when Joel Embiid is out, and he hasn't lived up to that. If you put someone else in the starting lineup, like, who would it be? If you have a Tyrese Maxey, DeAnthony Melton, Buddy Hield, Nico Batum, and I guess when Embiid comes back, Embiid starting lineup, I can see that working, but I'm also saying, like, there are things that Tobias Harris does well, size-wise, defensively, that Buddy Hield doesn't do well. Like, I don't think there's a clear option, like, I can't believe this dude's on the bench and Tobias Harris is starting. And the other thing you got to consider, too, is the chemistry of the team. I'm not saying, like, Tobias Harris will throw a fit if you ask him to come off the bench. But part of the whole keeping the team together and the continuity that Joel Embiid has talked about that he wants to see with the Sixers is Tobias Harris being a part of the starting lineup. Like, when you change that, you change the dynamic of maybe how Maxey plays, maybe how Batum plays, how these guys have gotten used to playing with each other. Like, Tobias Harris has been a mainstay here. So for all of his faults, at least there are players that are in the starting lineup that are comfortable with him at that point and know where he's supposed to be. So there are other unintended consequences from moving Tobias Harris. You know, it's an easier solution if he just stopped disappearing in big moments and played up to his contract. That's the easiest solution. Step up, play with some fire. Act like you want to go out there and rebound and fight for a win rather than just shrinking from the moment so often. There have been times where he's shown that, but it's not consistently enough. So, yeah, could you move Tobias Harris to the bench? I suppose, but I wonder how that would affect the rest of the team and how the players would view that. A guy who is a leader in the locker room and has been here for so long and is still a good basketball player, to just put him on the bench. I don't know that that's a realistic solution. 610-632-0975 is the number to join the program, and we've got some stuff more to get into. I'm very interested, too, on this. With the Eagles drama, it just never stops. With the Eagles hiring process for offense coordinator and defensive coordinator, I like Kellen Moore, and I like Vic Fangio. But I've heard some people bring up that there may have been an ulterior motive to what the Eagles did when hiring their coordinators. If you don't have faith in your head coach, and the Eagles showed by taking responsibility away from Nick Sirianni following this season, not all responsibility, but a lot of responsibility, that they don't have full faith in the head coach. If you were walking a tightrope, wouldn't you prefer a safety net under you? So, do the Eagles have a safety net for if Nick Sirianni does not keep his balance? We'll see what that has in store for the Eagles coming up and who that could be. Is he already in-house here? Some people seem to think so. I'm Connor Thomas, filling in for Andrew Salchunas here on 97.5 Middays. Silvana Keller on the board. And we are back after this here on 97.5 The Fanatic. Connor Thomas back live with you here, filling in for Andrew Salchunas on 97.5 Middays. The Chunas will be back on Monday as he returns from Jamaica. But meanwhile, I got you. We've been having a fun show today. I really enjoy the conversation we've been having. Appreciate everyone who's been chiming in on the phone lines because I was really frustrated last night with Tobias Harris and his performance for the Philadelphia 76ers. I can't say that I was surprised, but I was frustrated because this team, I still believe, has opportunity ahead of them. I'm not expecting them to just run through the Eastern Conference without Joel Embiid. I'm not expecting them to just have a cakewalk the rest of the way through the regular season. Their best player is currently unavailable. But I'm expecting the players that are getting paid a significant amount of money, and I know have the talent to at least try and, live up to that potential a little bit. I use try as a general word there. I don't think it's an effort thing for Tobias Harris. I brought this up earlier. I don't think it's a lack of effort. I think just his natural personality, he doesn't have that fire in him to go and attack the game the way a Tyrese Maxey does, or Joel Embiid does, guys like that who are great NBA players. That's where I'm at with him when I think about that. Basically, here's the thing, right? It's not that he can't play. I think some people treat this like the Sixers gave me a max contract. And I'm out there just getting my cardio in, getting every shot I put up blocked, having no chance to compete with anybody because I'm not an NBA player. Tobias Harris is an above-average NBA player. The problem is when he gets a golden opportunity to be more than that, more than just an above-average NBA player, and become a player who can lead a team. And that's a fair expectation because of the contract he signed. He just, more often than not, much more often than not, falls short. And I'm honestly tired of it. I'm over it because I want this team to be successful. I'm tired of the same old issues slowing the Sixers down. I think this year they have the best overall team, considering coach, considering depth, considering all of that. Second best player, which would be Tyrese Maxey when Joel Embiid's healthy. I think he is such a great fit for Joel when they're both healthy. If they can get this team back to 100% health, which may not be realistic, but I can still hope until I'm out of chances, I will believe that that's a possibility. I think they have a real opportunity. So that's why it's so disheartening to see that Tobias just once again has not stepped up, or at least didn't step up last night. Maybe he will. But that faith, I'm not going to have it because I've seen this movie too many times. 610-632-0975 is the number to chime in. By the way, we're in the 1 o'clock hour, which is brought to you by Ferguson, HVAC Lyon Conklin. Attention, HVAC contractors. For equipment, parts, and supplies for every heating and cooling job, visit one of Ferguson's counter locations in Bensalem, King of Prussia, Pennsauken, or Westchester. Let's go back to the phones because a bunch of people have thoughts on this Tobias Harris situation and where they're at with the Sixers right now. Let's talk to Will in Brookhaven next. Will, you're live here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Hey, Connor, how you doing?
Doing good. How about yourself, Will?
I'm okay. It's just watching that game last night, man. It's just numbing to see, Tobias Harris.
It drives you insane, right?
Yeah, he's been on his, 3 coaches now? Since Brett Brown, he's been on
Brown,
his team.
Doc, and now Nick Nurse.
You mean to tell me you still don't have no energy, no umph? It's numbing, I was telling, your caller, I was telling, it was numbing to see that because me and my brother went to the game in January when they played here, New York. You know how many points he had last game when we played the Knicks?
I don't off the top of my head.
I'll tell you, 5 points. He had 5 points.
And that's a good playoff team, a team you could play down the road, and you're going to need him. You can't have him absent.
They could have beat this team. They could have played close last night. I don't know if they would have won, but back in January, we should have beat them.
Right.
He only had 5 points. You mean to tell me?
And back in January, they didn't have OG Anunoby. They didn't have Bogdanovich. They didn't have these acquisitions they got at the trade deadline.
No, I think they had OG, but maybe they didn't have OG.
No, they wouldn't have. No.
Yeah, that's right. You're right. They didn't. And he only had 5 points. He played over 20-something minutes that game. In this game, he played over 26 minutes. And he only gave you 7 points. That's unacceptable, man.
I'm with you. Like, Will, we're on the same
frustrating.
page. I think everybody is. It's very frustrating. But I'm reading the board here. It sounds like you got something positive. So you think the Sixers can stay out of the play-in game or the play-in tournament?
Yeah, I think so. If we could just stay afloat within that 5 range, possibly 4, because, I mean, everybody's schedule is tough, even though ours are probably the toughest, but Milwaukee is not playing up to their capability.
Milwaukee has a tougher schedule than the Sixers, by the way.
Oh, okay. They do it well. Good. I mean, I think we can actually jump up to 2. I mean, I'm not pushing Cleveland out there, but
You
Cleveland.
think they could be the second best team seed-wise in the Eastern Conference right now?
If we can stay afloat and Joel Embiid come back mid-March or towards the end of March, if we can stay afloat, I mean, I'm not counting Cleveland out, but Cleveland, they're not playing as good as they think they are either. So I think if he comes back, I think we can push for that second seed.
Okay. Hey, man, I love the positivity, and I appreciate the call. Thank you for checking in, Will. I'm with him on the Tobias Harris thing. Like, it is beyond frustrating at this point to continue to watch the same old story from this Sixers team when Embiid is out. The step-up crowd is really just non-existent. Tyrese Maxey does it, and that's why he's an all-star. He's growing into a great player in his own right. But Tobias Harris has had years of opportunity, and just every time it seems that he is, more often than not, non-existent in games where he's given responsibility or opportunity to step up. Now, as far as the Sixers being like the 2 seed, I can't agree with Will there. I love the positivity, but I can't agree simply because here's the thing. He said if Embiid comes back in mid-March, then you go ahead and you make a run, you pick up some seeding. The schedule is difficult, so you're going to have to beat good teams even with Embiid, which the Sixers have proved they're capable of doing, but you've left yourself little margin for error, even if Embiid comes back on Will's time frame there. But we don't know when he's going to be back. It could be the first week of April. Then you're going to have, 2 weeks worth, maybe a little more of games before the postseason starts? There's not going to be enough time for Joel Embiid to affect the seeding that much, I don't think. Like, I think the goal for the Sixers would be to try and stay above water. And the water line in this instance is the play-in tournament. And then if you are capable of doing that, hopefully you get Embiid back in time where you can maybe bump up to like the 5 seed or the 4 seed maybe. Like that would be the 4 seed is the top of my range for where the Sixers could possibly be. I just don't think they're catching this every team in the East besides Boston. I don't think that's realistic with what they're facing injury-wise with Joel Embiid out. I hope they do. I hope Will's right. But I can't. That goes into the Tobias Harris category, right? I hope Tobias Harris steps up. I hope I'm wrong to say this was the final straw for me, and I'm not believing in him anymore to be a guy who's going to step up for this team. But realistically, like my eyes are telling me that that's what's going to happen. Same thing for the 2 seed. My eyes are telling me that what's going to happen is they're 4, 5 seed at best. And you're just going to have to deal with that when the postseason rolls around. But maybe Embiid will come back. Like, and I've already got Sean Comp on the YouTube chats already saying possibly 4. Come on now. Like, I know, but that is the top of the range that I'm thinking about. That would be like they've overachieved as much as they can in the regular season. And that would be with Joel Embiid coming back on a relatively normal time frame. Like, that's what I'm saying. I'm trying to, because I don't think I would absolutely, my eyes would pop out of my skull if you told me the Sixers were going to be the 4 seed. But I don't see it as likely. I see that as the top of their range. And that's why this is going to be so tough, because seeding is important in the NBA. Not every team is Miami, where you just know how to win in the postseason. You just go on a run from the play-in tournament to the finals. Like, that doesn't happen often. Just because, I think because 2 teams did it last year. Not to the finals, but the Lakers went from the play-in tournament in the West to the Western Conference Finals. And the Heat went from the play-in tournament in the East to the actual finals. I think people imagine that that is not a difficult thing to do, or not as difficult as it actually is. And maybe for some teams, it's not that tall of a task. But let's remember, even if Joel Embiid comes back, he doesn't have like this immunity about it. It doesn't say, like, nothing says that when Embiid comes back, oh, well, he's not going to have any more fatigue. He's not going to have any more pain. He's not going to have any more soreness. He's going to be immune to every other injury ever. Like, remember, this guy has gotten hurt in the postseason multiple times, too. And that was with easier paths by just number of games played. If they got to play in the play-in tournament with Embiid, they got to play a couple games there, and then they got to go into a first-round series, then a second-round series, then if they're lucky, a third-round series, and then the finals. Like, that is more stress in the postseason than he will have ever put on his body. There's no guarantee that, like, they're going to make a run at it the way other teams will, because Embiid's injury history would say you're already playing with fire, just getting him to the postseason even healthy. It's going to be tough for the Sixers. Is there a world where they get the best player in basketball back and he's a huge difference maker and they go on a run at this thing? Yes. But you know what would make that path easier? If guys like Tobias Harris stepped up more and carried their side of the weight to put the Sixers in a better spot for when Embiid comes back. 610-632-0975 is the phone number. Let's go to Glenn in Wallingford. Glenn, you're live here on the Fanatic.
Hey, what's going on, Connor?
What's up, Glenn?
Hey, listen, couple things before I get to my main point, which I want to talk about Embiid. But, like, you know, listen, at the end of the day, they're not catching. They're not going to get any home court advantage. I think it's just that the teams in the East are too good, and they're not good enough with the players that they have right now who are out and injured. Because aside from Embiid, I mean, Batum's been hurt. I mean, Milton's been hurt. Covington, whatever he brings. I mean, there's a lot of guys who have been hurt, and that you've missed out. So
you're right.
They're not getting the 4. Ideally, I'm okay with them even dropping to 6 because I don't think Cleveland's going to be 2 when it's all said and done. I'd be okay at 6 and seeing Cleveland in the first round, to be honest. So, but you know they've got to stay out. I'd like for them to stay out of the play-in tournament. But could you imagine, like, they get to the play-in tournament and Embiid's there. He's been back a couple weeks, and then you know they win the play-in. And you were talking about Embiid having more stress. But listen, you also got to remember he's also would have missed another 25 games here at the end of the season. So theoretically, he'll be the freshest he's ever been.
Wow.
Even as they go deeper into the playoffs.
The rest of his body will be fresh. That knee, I can't imagine is going to feel like fresh. I think he'll be healthy, but he's also going to have to work back into the shape that he's normally in. He can't do a lot of lower body stuff right now. So, like, I get what you're saying, Glenn. And here's the other thing I'll ask you, right? The matchups as far as if they're in the play-in tournament or if they're the 6th seed, they might play this team. It might be easier. When has an easier path ever made a difference for the Sixers?
No, I hear you. But listen, and with that being said, can you imagine? Do you think if Boston would love to see the Sixers in the first round of the playoffs?
I don't think anyone would love to see the Sixers. Yeah, and I agree with that point. Glenn, I appreciate you checking in. Like, I don't think teams are lining up to want to play if the Sixers get Joel Embiid back and he's healthy. I don't think there's teams saying, yeah, we got no problem. Give us Philly. Like, I think they'll be a dangerous team. I'm just saying, like, the odds are continuing to be stacked against them. And this is a team that when the odds were in their favor, found a way to come up short. So it makes me a lot more cognizant of seeding than, I don't know, if I was a fan of the Miami Heat. And I know that Jimmy Butler is a playoff performer, like, that's next level, that's had success, that has been there before and done that. If I like the Celtics as the 1 seed, like, I don't think they're saying, our path might be difficult. Like, part of me is just, as a Sixers fan, I know how difficult this team can make things, and I know that they are going to have a tough path even on top of that this year. So getting Embiid back healthy as early as possible is the key, but you can't rush it because you can't risk further injury. And the other key is this team, the guys that are available, have to help them stay afloat in the standings so that Embiid doesn't come back to like an 8-seeded Sixers team. Like, that would be terrible. And that's also on Nick Nurse too, right? We've had a lot of really good things to say about Nick Nurse this year. We have. And he's deserved, I think, each and every one of them. And it's not fair to say, hey, man, you're going to lose your best player and have a month stretch where you don't have most of your starting lineup, but we expect you to continue to stay competitive. Like, he's had to coach his rear end off this year to even keep this team where they are. So I don't say it's like, oh, well, Nick Nurse hasn't met expectations. I think he's exceeded them. But it is still on him to keep this team active and competitive and not just completely drowning. I don't think we're going to come to a point at the end of the season, whenever that may be, where we say, actually not a great first year from Nick Nurse. I think he's already shown that he has a real ability to coach this basketball team. But I can't say it's just on the players to keep this team in position to, when Joel Embiid comes back, make a run at this thing. I think I also got to look at the coach, and I got to say, hey, man, I know you've done a great job. It's not fair to ask you for more, but need more out of you. Got to find a way to get this team to stay afloat. And I think an easy way would be if just the guy who you're paying the most money of the active players went out and played like it. And Tobias Harris didn't have 7 points against the Knicks last night. You could have actually stole a victory. But I don't know. That's just me. 610-632-0975 is the phone number. Now, the Eagles situation, right? We talked about it earlier. I asked you about how much faith you have in Nick Sirianni and what would happen or what would have to happen for him to not have the Eagles head coaching job anymore. Is that something that could happen mid-season? Could you see the Eagles making a change if they had like a slow start and try and salvage the year? Or is it something that you say, well, the fact that they brought him back, it guarantees him at least this year, like the whole year. And then if they don't reach expectations when everything's said and done, then you make that change. Or maybe you think it's, well, they're keeping him around because Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie want to run the show, and he'll be here regardless of if he has success. There are those conspiracy theorists out there who say that Nick Sirianni's only here because Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie can tell him what to do. And I'll tell you what, like, I don't know for a fact that those people are wrong. I'm choosing to live in a more reality-based world than that. Stuff that I can tangibly look at and say, okay, that makes sense. So you could be right. I don't have enough data to consider that. Here's what I'll ask you, though. And Silvana brought this up to me earlier today, and I've heard a couple people mention this before, and we haven't truly dove into it yet. But when it comes to Nick Sirianni and the hiring of Kellen Moore as the offense coordinator, does that say more about this than we think? I really like Kellen Moore's resume. He's been a play caller in the NFL for 5 years. Worked with some really good quarterbacks, Justin Herbert in L.A., Dak Prescott in Dallas. He's had success with the offenses he's run. He is really good at scheming wide receivers open. These are all things that make him an exemplary candidate to fix the Eagles' offensive issues. But something to keep in mind is the Eagles interviewed Kellen Moore for a head coaching position in the past. When Nick Sirianni was hired, Kellen Moore was one of the interviewees. Apparently, obviously didn't get the job, but he was at least brought into the building to be considered for that role. Let me ask you this. I want you to really critically think about this. Be honest with yourself. If you were someone who was hiring for a job and you interviewed a couple of candidates and you hire somebody, and then you remember all those other candidates, you don't forget who they were. And then, for example, like that person becomes a manager. If you were hiring for the assistant manager and you brought in one of the people that you considered for the higher position, the position directly above their position, you're going to tell me that you didn't at least once, like not even a single time, think, well, if the person in that position doesn't work out, I got someone else in-house that I thought about for that position too. So we have a clear safety net, a succession plan. If indeed that person we hired for manager doesn't work out, we'll just promote the assistant manager. Is that what the Eagles are doing with Kellen Moore? Do you believe that that's a contingency plan for Nick Sirianni? It's not a hard jump to make, right? Kellen Moore had interest from the Eagles, at least enough to be interviewed for a head coaching position. He's proven his ability to call an offense. He's looked at head coaching positions in the past and has the aspirations of wanting to be one. Nick Sirianni's on the hot seat. You knew that before you brought in Kellen Moore. So wouldn't it make sense to bring in someone that you say, well, if Nick Sirianni doesn't have a lot of leash, if they start slow, Kellen Moore, congrats, buddy. You got the job. Like that's kind of what I'm looking at. And I'm saying, and it's a great job still to bring it up, that Kellen Moore seems to be waiting in the wings for an opportunity to coach. And he might have gotten that opportunity in Philadelphia, just has to wait to see if Nick Sirianni allows him to take it by not doing what he's supposed to do this year and turn this team back into a contender.
I think it's just very difficult to imagine that Howie and Jeff don't have a plan ready, especially because Nick Sirianni is entering, his last year of his contract anyways. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense. And just the fact that they obviously have praised Kellen Moore before and, interviewed him for the head coaching job at the same time they interviewed Nick Sirianni. I just think it's kind of giving some clues as to, hey, you know what, if things start going south, at least we have a candidate that we had looked into previously for a head coaching job and, find him at least well enough, strong enough to run our offense.
Right.
I mean, what's the difference in upping him if things go south or if, at the end of Nick's last year and maybe they give him the opportunity to, have this last year and see if it helps him get a job elsewhere, get at least interviews elsewhere.
Yeah,
maybe like a win-win in that sense.
I don't think there's any way this ends up in a win-win. Like
I mean, a win-win in the sense that rather than he would get more interviews, if they look well this year, the offense looks significantly better, maybe some teams will reach out to him more, once they announce it.
Yeah, I don't know they're too worried about who's getting a job after being here or anything like this. But I don't think there's any way that Kellen Moore was hired without the thought process that if we need a head coach, we've got a guy that we might trust in the building. I think that's an understood part of this. But here's the next step, right? Because I asked you to go through that mental scenario. Like, there's no way you wouldn't think about someone you interviewed for the position as a potential replacement for that position. That's only natural. Like, if I went on a date with a girl and then I end up not going out, all right, easy over there. And I end up not going out with them, and then I break up with, like, a girl I was dating, one of the people I would consider would be someone I've been on a date with before, because clearly I've thought about that as a possibility. Like, that's only natural. It's the same thing with this. So when you look at that, here's my real question, right? It's not so much, is Kellen Moore here as a potential replacement for Nick Sirianni? That's like 100% he is here as a potential replacement for Nick Sirianni if anything goes wrong. And then if nothing goes wrong and he gets another position, fine. If he wants to stay as the OC, fine. Like, it's not that he's not here also because he can't be a good offensive coordinator.
Yes.
Like, he will be good in that role. But my question is, and you could chime in at 610-632-0975, if this is not a hard thing to connect, like the dots we're connecting here are not rocket science. This isn't the Da Vinci Code. It doesn't take a trip around the Vatican to figure out that Kellen Moore has been interested in the position and the Eagles interviewed him. Is there a worry that there's going to be a power struggle this year in the Eagles coaching staff? Like, does Nick Sirianni see this? Because how could he not? Does he feel that his seat is hot? I don't know how he couldn't feel that. I'm sure he had conversations this year that was like, my goodness, like, I'm going to lose my job. Like, he's got to feel the pressure of what Lurie and maybe Howie as well, but Jeffrey Lurie being the owner and his boss said to him after this season. And I wonder if that's going to be a dynamic that affects the Eagles. Like, if I'm Nick Sirianni,
could be.
Yeah, if I'm Nick Sirianni and I'm looking at it this year, and I see Kellen Moore running a great offense, I see the players really gravitating to him, being in a position where, okay, I can tell that this team really likes this guy, and I know that I'm already in a tough spot when it comes to what my future is with this organization, because I don't call the plays on offense and I don't call the plays on defense, and all I do is kind of make sure the locker room's good, and we collapsed last year and kind of in that sense, so I'm already kind of in a tough spot. I wonder if there would be a power struggle there where he tries to win over the locker room, or not sabotages Kellen Moore, I don't think. But that's what I'm just saying. This is a sticky situation, having a coach that seems to be not so much a lame duck coach in Nick Sirianni, but one firmly on the hot seat well before a season even begins. That makes things very complicated, especially for a team that's as competitive as the Philadelphia Eagles are right now. And I wonder how Kellen Moore's prepared to handle it. I wonder how the offensive players are going to handle it. I wonder exactly what's going on as far as the mentality in the building. And it hasn't happened yet because Kellen Moore has not called a single play for the Philadelphia Eagles. But if this team has success, I wonder how much the players consider that as being a result of Kellen Moore. And almost as importantly, right? In other towns, maybe not as important, but almost as importantly here, I wonder how much the fan base starts to get onto Kellen Moore's side if the offense is just completely turned around. Because there will be people, and I could be one of them.
Yeah.
I'll tell you honestly, I could be one of them. If I see a really good offense from the Eagles this year, one of my first thoughts is going to be, Nick Sirianni couldn't do that.
Why don't we keep the guy that changed it around?
Right. They look a lot better under Kellen Moore than they ever did when Nick Sirianni had a hand in this. And does that put you at a compromising position as the head coach of the football team? And does that put you in a tough spot as the owner of the football team? Like, it's going to be very interesting. Last year, they didn't have this problem because no one was looking at Brian Johnson and said,
no.
he's going to be, like, taking over for Nick Sirianni. I think people felt comfortable with him as a coordinator, and I think that was a hire that a lot of people liked because of an internal hire and a guy that excelled in his role as the quarterback's coach, but he didn't have, like, that clean path to, like, this guy's due to be a head coach. Kellen Moore has that. And we're just looking at the offensive side of the ball. I mean, people say, oh, Vic Fangio, this is a retirement job. His family's from up around Scranton. He wants to be up here so he can hang out with them. And this is just his kind of, I'm going to work for the Eagles. I'm going to be their DC. I'm going to run the system I know. I'm just going to do this until I don't want to coach anymore. But he's a guy with head coaching experience. He's a guy that's been around forever. He's a guy that maybe the Eagles look at as a potential option as well. So Nick Sirianni is in charge of things, but he has two people directly under him as far as their positions with the team that could be potential replacements for his, and he's on the hot seat. That is a place where professionalism is going to be very important.
Yes.
Communication is going to be very important. Trust in the coaches, which it doesn't sound like the players had last year, but trust in the coaches is going to be very important. And it's going to mean that you remember how this year when things went bad for the Eagles, because there wasn't a lot of faith in the coaching and the leadership in the locker room didn't seem to do what they were supposed to do, it just collapsed? Well, how do you think adversity is going to be handled this year if the head coach is worried about his job, the coordinator on either side could be gunning for his job, maybe not like outright, like I want to take this guy's job so he's on the unemployment line, but like wants a higher position or could have been brought in here to be considered for that. And then the players are going to have to essentially choose sides. Like, this can get really, really interesting really, really quickly for the Philadelphia Eagles when it comes to the dynamic with the coaching staff this year. It may not. They may be successful, and winning solves everything. So I'm not saying, oh, drama inbound for the Birds. They've already got enough going on right now. But I'm saying that consider what the future could be to understand how important it is that this team has success now. That situation could get really tricky really quickly. But that's a problem for the fall version of Philadelphia sports. Right now, we got to focus on getting the Sixers right, enjoying a little bit of Flyers hockey as well as they stay afloat and look towards the playoffs, potentially. The trade deadline for the NHL coming up soon. But the Sixers will take on the Cavs tonight. Sounds like D'Anthony Melton will be back. Both teams on a back end of a back-to-back, I believe. And Donovan Mitchell, of course, the head of the snake for the Cleveland Cavaliers, had an illness last night and was out, so we'll see if he'll be able to play. The Sixers may actually be the favorite team tonight at home against the Cavs, even though they're on the back end of a back-to-back, and maybe will be a little bit healthier if D'Anthony Melton's available. So I hope Tobias Harris redeems himself tonight. It makes me sound dumb for the criticisms I hurled his way during today's show, but Some people are going to have to start stepping up for the Sixers if they want to stay afloat until Joel Embiid potentially comes back, and that'll be their task for the weekend. Our task for the week is done. Coming up next, the best show ever is going to have you. Tyrone, Ricky, Jen. They got a great Friday show planned for you, as always. So I'm excited to listen for everything, including, of course, out of context at the end of the show. But everything is going to be great for them, so we'll pass it over. We'll talk to you next time here on 97.5 The Fanatic.